בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל, אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל, שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל, לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future sons of
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 948 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again as Russia loses key officers. So terrible for them. And also, the Middle East is on the brink of total regional war. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been getting incredibly large news out of Ukraine and the Middle East over the past 24 hours. Inside of the Middle East, we've been able to hear from U.S. officials and sources that a massive Israeli military buildup is currently being conducted at this very moment along the southern Lebanese border, and it does appear that a ground invasion is going to be happening probably within the next 48 to 72 hours most likely, or within the next week at our longest anticipated window. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have continued to be under fire from Hezbollah forces today inside southern Lebanon, as large rocket volleys have been fired into the northern area around the port of Haifa. Some of these rockets have ended up striking even as far south as Jordan. One rocket, an errant one, ended up striking near the Jordanian city of Irbid, once again showing that Hezbollah forces are very erratic in their firing procedures and are willing to strike at really any country that may be Western or American lined in any sense of the imagination. At the exact same time, we were able to get the wonderful news that the Wicked Witch of the East is dead, as Nasrallah has been declared dead. The airstrike yesterday, hitting the bunker complex within the center of Beirut, was a dead-on hit on Nasrallah himself and ended up killing the Wicked Witch and most of the command of Hezbollah with it, meaning that Hezbollah...
Nasrallah is dead, inshallah. Oh, that's terrible.
Man, Nasrallah got hit in his Snazrallah, inshallah, and it looks as though he will not be doing all that well, to be entirely honest. At the exact same time, we've also been able to hear of an unknown strike occurring in the area around the very tip of the Euphrates River traveling into Iraq. It is unknown at the moment whose side conducted the strike. Either it could be the Israelis or it may be another affiliated group within the region, but this area is known as an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps hotspot where they transport weapons and arms across the Iraqi border and into Syria, and then onwards from Syria and into their crossing points near the area of Baalbek and Zahle, where they then make it further south and into southern Lebanon around where the Hezbollah armed forces currently are. We've also been able to hear that Iran has pledged a military response to the state of Israel after the crippling airstrike was conducted on Hezbollah command yesterday, with the Iranians saying that they will respond at a time of their choosing, wherever and whenever that might be, meaning that that will probably be, so far from now, everyone will have forgotten why they conducted the strike, but nevertheless, they will most likely be responding at some point in the future. Meanwhile, outside of the Middle East and all the way up inside of Russia, we've been able to hear that a major key officer in the Russian Federation has been killed today, gunned down in the streets of Moscow in some sort of a gang incident. The colonel that was killed was key and crucial into developing and fleshing out Russian drone doctrine, tactics, and technology for the Russian armed forces to use inside of Ukraine. A very important person to lose at this point of the war, considering that the Russians are still somewhat behind on drone warfare and are still desperately trying to catch up to the Ukrainians in terms of their abilities and actions. It seems as though the Russians will now be taking, of course, one step forward and two steps back in the big picture, as another key officer has ended up getting killed because of the erratic and violent nature of the streets of Moscow. Or at least that's what they're wanting us to think. Meanwhile, inside of the area of Ukraine, we have been able to hear incredibly good news that the Ukrainians have been inflicting wildly high casualties onto Russian armed forces today, and we also saw, not that I usually mention this early in the stream, but today was the record for the highest amount of Bobcat skid steers lost in a single 24-hour period. It's
too many to bear, man. It's too many to bear. I'm seeing some folks say it might be actually a typo. I refuse to believe that. When we get to this segment, it's going to be a big celebration, almost a milestone. Actually, it was a milestone, a complete record.
Man, I'm telling you what, it will be a complete record if it's true. And of course, we have absolutely loads of news to cover. An insanely high amount of news, as a matter of fact. And that's actually going to be taking us up into Russia, first off, into probably one of our bigger pieces of news for today inside of Ukraine. As we were able to hear that a Russian colonel, key to the Russian drone warfare development and doctrine, has been killed today. And to give you all the exact information that we got from Samuel Romani, the breaking news is that Colonel Alexei Kolmonstiev has been killed in the Moscow region. Kolomyastiev, which is an incredibly difficult last name for me to pronounce, was a key figure supporting Russia's drone development and use of Iranian Shahed drones. He appears to have been blasted to pieces somewhere inside of the Moscow region, a lot like the Shahed 136s have ended up blasting some Ukrainian sites to pieces as well. A very unfortunate fate for such a key person in the Russians' drone doctrine and tactics development sphere. And this officer is very important because while he may not be a general, and he's only a colonel, which in the Russian military doesn't really mean that much, a Russian colonel here in the West is equivalent to about maybe a major or something along those lines. It's on up there, but it's not incredibly on up there. But nevertheless, the loss of this colonel is going to be incredibly significant for the Russians, considering that they are still trying to update and develop their fighting doctrine around the modern war, which largely consists of a lot of heavy drone usage. The Russians are still falling quite behind on this, and that colonel was involved in trying to procure and develop new kinds of strategies and new kinds of tech for the Russian Federation's armed forces in Ukraine and Kursk to be able to use against the Ukrainians about as effectively as the Ukrainians are using their drones currently against the Russians. We now know that that's a complete long shot at best, because this guy was really one of the few that we know of out of the handful of officers that they have that were trying to spearhead the development of this new category of warfare for the Russians, and with his death, we may see that they end up having a little bit of an unfortunate demise in the drone technology sphere, but it will be an incredibly lucky one for the Ukrainians, as they will be seeing that the Russians' drone development from this point may actually end up being stagnated a little bit, as they will find a replacement for this guy, but he may not be as up to speed or knowledgeable about drone warfare and how to develop it and flesh it out to be as potent and dangerous as possible, meaning that Russians may be seeing on the front line a reduced combat efficiency as time continues to go by, as their drone warfare and their drone technology sort of stagnates or progresses quite slowly, while the Ukrainians still move at the fever pitch speed that they've been moving at throughout the entirety of the war in developing their drone activities. But moving on out of Russia for a quick second, and that big news coming out of the death of that Russian officer, it's time for us to move on into another interesting little piece of news. Probably a very interesting piece of news to come out of the Middle East if we've ever seen it. Many of y'all may remember that yesterday there was this nice little explosion that happened inside of the southern area of Beirut, down in an area called Danieh. And this is the explosions that we saw yesterday. I just want to play this again to jog everyone's memory and kind of get everyone up to speed and on the exact same page about what happened. But here's the airstrike again, just to make sure to jog everyone's memory. Huh. Pretty significant.
Pretty big one, I must say.
Now, not to play the whole clip, but as y'all could see, the actual attack was pretty significant. It appears that the Israelis dropped just about every single bomb they had in Israel on this exact one spot, and many people may remember why. Under the rubble from that explosion that we can see right here in this picture was the Hezbollah command bunker. This bunker is used by Hezbollah, along with a couple of other locations, to coordinate and operate their their fighting forces within southern Lebanon against the state of Israel. Interestingly enough, it was a very intricate plan that went into this, as Netanyahu, the president of Israel, had actually traveled to the United States on what appeared to have been a state visit to be able to conduct diplomatic actions with the United States. During that time, the Hezbollah command, including Nasrallah, who is largely the leader of Hezbollah, had decided that it was safe enough, considering that Netanyahu was a pretty good ways away and may miss the window of opportunity to be able to blow them up if they did show up at this command post, ended up arriving and getting into the bunker. And as soon as Nasrallah got into this bunker, his fate was sealed. An Israeli F-35I Adir was already on the way by the time he was walking into that bunker into Lebanon to be able to drop its air-to-ground ordnance onto the specific block and to be able to destroy the buildings above and the bunker below that Nasrallah was inside of. The bombings that I just showed you all a moment ago on film were all of the bombs that Israel dropped that were meant to hit that command bunker. And the picture that you're seeing right here was the rubble that remained. Stories began to fly from every single direction. Nasrallah is alive. Nasrallah wasn't even there. Nasrallah is A-OK, and we're going to avenge all of our commanders that weren't Nasrallah that ended up getting killed inside of this bunker. But we can assure and promise everyone from Hezbollah, a wonderful and trustworthy organization that everyone knows, that Nasrallah isn't dead. And then 10 hours ago, they had to come out and admit Nasrallah is dead. Hezbollah finally came out and admitted it. The Wicked Witch of the West the Wicked Witch of the East, actually, is finally dead. The Israelis actually dropped enough bombs on them at the right place and the right time that they ended up killing the leader of Hezbollah. And while other people in Hezbollah may have no balls, this guy has nothing left. Apparently, we have heard that he is somewhat intact, but the attack has left him absolutely shattered and in pieces because most of the Hezbollah command was lost in the strike. But nevertheless...
Oh dear, this attack was so unfortunate and so terrible. It left him in tatters. Oh dear. What a shame.
It's a shred, you say. But beyond that, this guy is dead now, and it's quite good to hear because this guy wasn't exactly a nice guy. And let me tell you all a little bit more about this fellow and who he was. So Hassan Nasrallah, that y'all can see right here, is the Secretary General of Hezbollah, largely meaning that he's kind of the leader of the entire organization. If anyone was going to be called the president of Hezbollah, it would actually be this guy right here. And he has been the leader of the Hezbollah movement for an incredibly long time. Decades, as a matter of fact. He has been in that position. Oh, look, Wikipedia updated. My heavens, Matthew, they are quick, aren't they? But
man, they are so quick with that. It's crazy.
They are insanely quick, man. There's someone on every page on Wikipedia of a biography just waiting to update when they die. But still, beyond that, this guy has been the general secretary of Hezbollah for 32 years at the point of his death yesterday. This guy has been leading Hezbollah for about as long as it's existed almost. And the fact that this guy was killed is going to be a massive loss, not only to Hezbollah, but also to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as this guy is the guy. Like, if anyone was to get killed, this is Hezbollah's version of Osama bin Laden. This is their version of al-Baghdadi. This is the guy. Literally, if you were to knock anyone out in Hezbollah, this was the guy that you would have wanted to go for. And he ended up getting bombed yesterday. And as you all know, they didn't really, hold back. They whipped out the flying China on this one. They dropped every bomb that Israel had onto that exact spot, and they did end up getting the guy and wiping him out. So going off that, we are assuming that Hezbollah is going to be reeling from this strike. A lot of people always say that everyone is replaceable, and that's true. At least in theory, everyone's replaceable. And there will be a new General Secretary of Hezbollah probably in the next few days. But the thing about that, though, is that while you can replace people, some of them are a lot more competent in their role than others. That's very clear to know, because everyone can see throughout all of history that there are leaders of groups and nations that are considered to be the greatest, and then there are leaders and groups of nations and groups that are considered to be the absolute worst, and may even lead to the death of an organization. Nasrallah largely could be considered a somewhat competent leader of Hezbollah. He was able to survive an endless amount of assassination attempts up until yesterday, and not only that, he was able to ensure that Hezbollah remained cohesive and consolidated around a single goal and objective. And while the group may have ended up going out of control here and there, that was largely because of Nasrallah's command of the institute that Hezbollah is. With his death, we can assume that a new leader is going to be appointed, and this new leader either may be even better, or there's a decent chance that they may even be a lot worse than Nasrallah was. And if they're a lot worse,
he's already been replaced, right? You do know that, right?
Yes, but is that going to be solidified? Do we really know that for sure? Because this guy could end up being put in, and he could almost end up being like an interim guy. He could end up getting thrown out or something like that in the next few days, and there could be a power struggle or something like that.
What? Well, he was there for a short while. Like, he was interim. I guess that's a good way to say it. The guy that replaced Hezbollah's Hassan Yassin, or actually Nasrallah, whose name was Yassin or something like that. I really can't say it like all the way. That guy was already taken out by Israel. Like, literally a couple hours after taking over, after Nasrallah was killed, he's already been killed by Israel. So I guess you could say he was definitely interim because he was only there for a short little while. That's how quick Israel is with these assassinations.
Oh, the ebbs and flows, Matthew, of the internal power struggles. Sometimes, Matthew, it's Machiavellian, even, if that's the correct way to pronounce that. I hope it is. But, you have little in struggles. Every once in a while, Israel drops a bomb on your new leader and just kills him. It's unfortunate stuff. I mean, really. And hopefully we can see that this little political struggle within Hezbollah continues. I have a hope that we will probably see that a new leader will be appointed, and he may also go the way of a political backstabbing by an unfortunate Israeli bombing, which would be very sad to see. And of course, we could only hope and really pray for Lebanon in a sort that things will continue to go that well, because it seems as though things are going incredibly well for the Hezbollah leadership. It seems as though they are just floating right through. I mean, really, things are passing quite through them, and they seem to be spreading out amongst a wide area. Not a lot of them, but, pieces of one. But still, beyond that, it is very good news to hear, and we will be looking forward to a little bit more information about who will be next. Who will be the next leader of Hezbollah? We already had Nasrallah. We already had the new guy who ended up getting blown up. Is there going to be a new one that also ends up getting blown up as well? Probably so. But beyond that, Hezbollah is going to be dealing with a massive problem in their leadership. It's going to be very hard for them to try and figure out what to do from here, considering that their command has literally been obliterated over the past few months in Damascus, in Iraq, now in Beirut. And not only that, Nasrallah has been killed, and every single successor so far has also been killed on top of that. We are assuming that Hezbollah is absolutely in a complete state of confusion and really has no idea of what they're doing or what the grand battle plan would be. If they do have an idea, it's probably going to end up being outdated, say in about a week or two. But that is what we're seeing at the moment, and it is incredibly good news to hear. Nasrallah is dead, and that is a massive win, not only for Israel, but really the entirety of the Western world. Hezbollah is not a benevolent force that's just operating in the Middle East. Hezbollah is a very interesting kind of an organization. YouTube doesn't really like us to label them exactly what they are, but many of y'all can get the idea that they generally like to go around and inflict a certain amount of terror on people around the world. And they've even directed that terror of a sort onto people in Europe and also within the United States as well. They are an incredibly dangerous organization, one that could be described as maniacal and genocidal at the best, and at the worst you could come up with really any other title you would wish to, but nevertheless nevertheless, they seem to be massively on the back foot at this point. But that isn't stopping the little underlings in Hezbollah right now from trying to retaliate for the death of their leader and most of their command forces, as northern Israel has been blanketed in air raid alerts over the past few hours. We got to see that almost the entire northern area around, I believe it is, and let me make sure, let's see, it would be near Nazareth, was lit up with air raid alerts all the way from Haifa and all the way down to the actual area of Jenin, just on the southern side of the West Bank. The entire area was covered in air raid alerts. And also, another crazy thing that we were able to hear is that not only was that the case, but some Hezbollah rockets actually ended up landing and exploding within Jordanian-controlled territory near the city of Irbid. As we were able to hear, according to Spectator Index, that apparently a missile launched from Lebanon had landed in Jordan. Once again, showing us that there are some pretty wild actions being made by Hezbollah forces in the field at the moment, as they are wildly firing rockets at really just about anything and everything that they can, and hoping that it hits anything and everything that it can as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here, but we do know that there's a really good idea of what Israel's going to be doing from here in the future, as we did start to hear pretty soon that there was some sort of a buildup happening in this area near to the southern Lebanese border. And this was a very interesting statement. I want to make sure that we get this word for word. The U.S. has observed changes in Israel's military posture along the border with Lebanon, officials said on Saturday, hours after Hezbollah announced that its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in an Israeli airstrike. A senior Iranian commander from the Quds force was also killed in Friday's attack, which caught U.S. officials by surprise. Why in the world did that catch us by surprise? Like, the Iranians fund and operate these people for the most part. Why in the world is that surprising? Anyways, the Israeli military posture observed on Saturday differed from that of the previous day, leading officials to consider whether Israel might be preparing for an invasion of southern Lebanon. And then right after that, we got a much clearer picture that they really are getting ready for the offensive, as we then got information several hours later that Israel is preparing for a limited ground entry into southern Lebanon. Most likely the south of the Litani campaign that we've been talking about for an incredibly long time, which will be supported by a heavy air barrage, a heavy artillery barrage, and then we'll see that the IDF begins to move forward across the border, wiping out any resistance that may remain until they reach the southern bank of the Litani River. It does seem at this point, it is without a doubt, that Israel will be invading southern Lebanon, according to all of the information that we have, all of the actions that the Israelis have conducted. This all appears to be the air campaign leading up to the ground invasion. And if that is the case, we most likely will be seeing that Israeli forces will rapidly advance up into the area south of the Litani River. They will then hold at the banks of the Litani River, deal with any resistance that may be popping up behind their lines south of the area of Nabateh, and then they will begin to advance even further north into the remainder of Lebanon, most likely advancing up to the point of Beirut and Zahle, then holding in that area, dealing with any resistance that pops up. This phase may take much longer, considering that Beirut is an incredibly large city compared to any other inside of Lebanon, and then once they clear out that area of any active resistance against the Israeli Defense Forces, they will then continue to advance even further north and through the rest of Lebanon, making sure to wipe out any and every bit of resistance that may be showing up along the way against the Israeli armed forces. We also got to hear that apparently this is also a larger ambition of the Israelis to make sure that they wipe out any resistance, not only in Lebanon, but any resistance that may even be brought up by foreign support directly from the Iranians, as we got to hear of a very interesting airstrike that occurred right here, right at the border, near the Euphrates River. And I'm actually going to be bringing y'all to this exact area in Iraq, because this is very close to the At-Tanf garrison right down here, and Tower 52, which is right there as well, that ended up getting stricken and attacked by Iranian-backed proxies a little while ago. Right over here at the Euphrates River is the Syrian-Iraqi border crossing. It's not an incredibly big one, but it is one that exists nonetheless. It appears that no brave soul decided to get this close to the Iraqi-Syrian border, which is fairly understandable, so we can't get a street view of the area. But nevertheless, in this area, it is assumed that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps funnels a massive load of weaponry from inside of Iraq into Syria, and then through Syria and on into Lebanon. From what we largely understand, the Islamic Revolutionary Revolutionary Guard Corps attempts to conduct this supply line from the mountains of Iran here to its western border and north of Baghdad. These supplies then travel through northern Iraq and across the Euphrates into the area around al-Bukamel, and then the supplies move from inside of Iraq through Syria. They bribe corrupt Syrian officials and also SDF officials to get it through, and then it travels all the way through Assad's territory in western Syria, and then right across the border and into the area of Baalbek or Zahle, and then funnels further south and into the area where Hezbollah will be fighting the Israelis down inside of southern Lebanon. This massive supply line is one that largely operates underground and is very hard to note or see, at least by the naked eye. It's not something that you're going to be seeing a lot on satellite footage. Most of this is concealed as best as possible, and this is all put together by guesswork or somewhat loose intelligence that has been released to the public. However, one of the most important crossings is right there, and according to information that we have been able to hear, according to Visegrad, that heavy airstrikes have been reported by the Iraqi-Syrian border near the Syrian city of al-Bukamel, where most of the Iranian weapons smuggled from Iran to Lebanon via Iraq and Syria pass through. And it does seem as though that the Israelis are starting to conduct exterior actions not only inside of Lebanon but also on Syrian and Iraqi territory as well, to deal with any kind of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps support that may be funneled to Hezbollah in the upcoming war. And it looks as though, from what we can tell, the damage may have been somewhat significant in that area, but we're still going to have to kind of wait and tell because it's not really that clear at the moment. We did hear of an airstrike, but we haven't gotten any video and picture evidence from the ground to be able to confirm the size or scale of the damage that was caused and the amount of technical equipment or munitions that may have been lost as a result of that airstrike. But moving on from that and into Tehran inside of Iran, we were also able to hear that Iran said that they will most likely respond. This was according to Fitux News, that the Iranian National Security Committee said that we will respond at the appropriate time to the Israeli attack on Beirut, meaning that they may be planning for some kind of attack against Israel, or this may once again be hype talk, and they may leave their proxy to die alone, which is something that seems to be considered a lot more by the Iranians at this point, now that there's a heavier U.S. presence in the area. But nevertheless, it does seem as though, from what we can tell, that the Iranians may possibly be trying to move this into a complete regional war, but it is certain that this will be a regional war in between Israel and Lebanon. We just don't know if the Iranians are going to get involved at this point. But we have heard news that the Iranians will be holding an emergency meeting very soon. And do y'all think the Middle East will go into a complete and entire regional war over this issue? And it seems as though some people believe that that is the case. Others believe that Iran might eventually back down. But everyone is largely across the board with what they're thinking and assuming about these upcoming attacks. And Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so the big question is the entire Middle East going to go into a regional war now that Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has been taken out completely in a bunker buster bomb, a big explosion? He was taken out completely. So about 41% said no, Iran will eventually back down, while 36% said yes, it's really happening this time, and 13% said it really depends on the USA's response. And on this one, I gotta say, for some reason, Iran's response is really not that forceful to a figure as large as Nasrallah being killed. I think the leader of Iran has issued a 5-day period of public mourning, which means that Iran's not going to do anything for at least 5 days to respond to this recent assassination. So based on that, it looks like maybe Iran might be trying to hold off before they attack Israel, and they may not be planning to attack Israel at all since we have so many assets in the region. So I'm going to say it really just depends. So I'm kind of with a 13%. But it could go either way at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, Iran probably may or may not back down. I'd actually have to go with it kind of depends on America's response, because if America seems to back out of the region and largely leave Israel alone, we may see that the Iranians start an air campaign against the Israelis with missiles and drones over a very long period of time. If the United States remains steadfast in its support for the Israelis and also continues to build up the amount of forces that we have in the region and also their air defense and air force equipment, we may see that the Iranians actually back off and allow Hezbollah to largely die alone inside of Lebanon, because they don't want to take on the collective firepower of Israel and the United States combined in the region. So it really, in my opinion, kind of depends on what the United States is going to do, because it may or may not make this viable for them to respond, or may make it to where it's completely unviable to respond and practically pointless. So we'll kind of have to wait and see, in my opinion. I don't really think there's a clear answer to this, at least from what I'm seeing at the moment, but a lot of people are still trying to figure out what will be going on. And we are also trying to figure out a lot more information about what kind of buildup is being seen at the northern Israeli border. Of course, Israel has a decent amount of control on operational security, so it's not like we can easily tell exactly what kind of armed forces are building up in this area and what kind of offensive abilities they may have, or what kind of forces these even are, or the number of them for that matter. We would assume, however, that the Israelis will most likely be bringing forward mostly infantry units from the onset, most likely mechanized brigades, may end up being the first to cross the border. We're not assuming that armored divisions will be moving over immediately, or armored brigades. That would seem to be a little bit too much of a stretch at the moment. So here's what we believe the Israeli offensive will be looking like here in the very near future. The Israelis have most likely built up a pretty interesting task force, if you want to call it that, of multiple different brigades. We're assuming that the Israelis are operating off of a Western NATO Army brigade battalion style structure, with the battalion being the core fighting element of their armed force, although in reality the Israelis operate off of a slightly different doctrinal form or battle organization. So this isn't exactly one-to-one comparison, like an exact model of how the Israelis will fight, but this is about as close as we can get it and make it easy to explain. So at the moment, the Israelis most likely have multiple light, medium, and heavy brigades that are currently based in this area. The light and medium brigades will probably be the first to move across the border and engage Hezbollah forces. We're assuming also in this hypothetical that Hezbollah forces, while being an irregular force, will engage the Israelis in a semi-regular fashion, at least at the onset, as they will be trying to stop the Israelis' advance into the border. We'll also give a hypothetical here about an asymmetrical battle where they do not conduct such a thing, and the Israelis largely advance unopposed, but the resistance pops up as soon as they take over an area. So going over our first hypothetical, the Israelis move over the light and medium brigades first, and these will end up engaging the Hezbollah forces and fixing them into position, at least parts of these forces that will be fighting the Israelis at that point. Thanks to the light and medium brigades fixing these Hezbollah forces into position, because they'll be engaged in a firefight with them, the Israelis will be able to triangulate any air support or artillery fire onto those Hezbollah forces and easily overwhelm them and destroy them. The Hezbollah forces really don't have an ability to conduct counter battery, and they really don't have an ability to conduct any air defense operations either, so the Israelis largely do have, at least in a conventional standpoint, the superiority of firepower needed to fix and then destroy in detail any Hezbollah forces that may be in this region, meaning that Israeli forces will probably be met with a great deal of success if Hezbollah forces attempt to engage in a semi-regular fashion. However, going off of our second hypothetical, also some of y'all are wondering where in the world did the heavy divisions come in, or the heavy brigades. The heavy brigades would come in if the Hezbollah forces ever put up any significant resistance in a single area, and we could see, well, the Israeli commanders could see that this is a focal strong point of any kind of resistance on the front. The heavy brigades will be leveraged against that specific area of the front to overwhelm and destroy in detail any Hezbollah forces that were fixed in position in the process of that fight. That's really the only time that we would believe heavy brigades would be used in the opening battles that Israel would be conducting moving across the border. But our more likely option, and our second option here, is that the the Hezbollah forces largely forego any kind of conventional fighting against the Israeli armed forces and instead decide to conduct some sort of asymmetrical fighting against the Israeli armed forces. This means that the medium and light brigades would be the first to move across the border, and they would practically meet no resistance whatsoever. They would be largely working with Israeli intelligence from the Mossad to be able to try and figure out if they were going to be moving up onto any known Hezbollah checkpoints, any known Hezbollah communications or command centers, or any kind of weapons caches that may exist, and destroy those along the way. And these medium and light brigades may also be advancing as well, with the idea of really combing the entire area that they're moving through and trying to find any sort of tunnel networks or any sort of hidden supply routes that could be targeted and destroyed by those units before the heavy brigades start to move in. Once these forces start to move far enough in, the heavy brigades will naturally follow behind them, lagging behind and waiting for them to actually engage and fix in position any Hezbollah forces in stronger numbers, so that way the heavy brigades can be moved up and then used to destroy any kind of resistance seen. This would be the point at that exact moment that we would probably see that Hezbollah forces would finally start to come out of hiding and begin to engage in fight against the Israeli armed forces. This means that while the heavy brigades may not be meant to deal with the actual initial fighting, at least in terms of the combat in an asymmetrical situation, they may be the first to actually engage and destroy any Hezbollah forces, as by the time Hezbollah ends up crawling out of their hiding holes or their houses in the area, the light and medium brigades probably will have moved on by that point, and they'll be ending up going against the heaviest amount of firepower that Israel can leverage on the ground in the form of the heavy brigades. So going off of that probably would end up not boding Hezbollah all too well either, even in that scenario, but it probably would do them better than trying to engage in a semi-regular fashion like in our first hypothetical, where they would literally quite easily be destroyed in detail really within the first opening days and then completely destroyed. So with that was largely the kind of analysis that I can give at the moment on what we'll probably be seeing within southern Lebanon, and then that will be a wash, rinse, and repeat with Israel moving deeper and deeper into Lebanon. This will pretty much be the same thing, just moving on into different zones and areas, and then the Israelis will fix and then destroy in detail any Hezbollah forces that are found along the way. So I hope that gives a fairly good idea, at least on the strategic scale, what this fighting will look like. On the ground fighting scale, on the realistic scale of what we'll be seeing on film, it'll probably look pretty interesting. We'll probably see that Israeli forces end up traveling through the valleys in this area, especially the heavy brigades that we'll be talking about with the Israelis that may end up engaging in an asymmetrical fight. Those will most likely be passing through the valleys, through the major roadways that have been made in that area, and we'll probably see the Hezbollah forces end up trying to conduct a semi-realistic turkey shoot on those brigades by setting up ATGMs on the mountains overlooking these valleys and firing down onto these Israeli vehicles. If the Israelis are largely using their most modern Merkava Mark IV Ms equipped with the trophy systems, these turkey shoots will certainly not be turkey shoots and will just be highlighting these anti-tank units of Hezbollah's armed forces to be targeted and destroyed by Israeli airstrikes or Israeli artillery later on as those small firefights would occur. So still, it doesn't look like it will end up well for Hezbollah. The only way that they could end up trying to even inflict a large amount of damage or a moderate amount of damage is to pretty much stay in hiding permanently and then only pop up when it is absolutely 100% in their favor, and then try and inflict some sort of battle damage onto an unsuspecting Israeli force that has their guard down. That would be really the only way that we could see them inflicting any real kind of damage, because beyond that, it will probably be the same amount of casualties and damage that we saw in the Gaza Strip against the IDF, and that was decent, but it wasn't incredibly high like we were expecting. But nevertheless, I hope that does give an incredibly good picture of what we'll probably be seeing in Lebanon coming up here in the next few days. But I also see that a lot of people are weighing in and talking about what Israel might do next. Because while we're talking about what Israel is certainly going to be doing next in Lebanon, there are still massive strategic plays, at least diplomatic ones and political ones, that they could be making against the Islamic Republic of Iran here in the near future. And a lot of people are wondering, is Israel going to end up attempting to assassinate the leader of Iran next? And a lot of people are going to be thinking that the leader of Iran is the president. Actually, it's Khamenei, who is the Ayatollah, which is pretty much the leader of Iran by default. The president is almost a bit of a puppet of a sort and really only deals with sort of domestic administrative things rather than everything, like the Ayatollah.
Khamenei gave himself the title, the Supreme Leader of Iran. You gotta love it when they give themselves the adjective like supreme or great leader or something like that. So that's very kind of yourself to give you that title, like you're just an excellent leader, when pretty much nobody in Iran likes Khamenei because he's a dictator, basically. It's kind of interesting.
Bro, Khamenei said, I'm not just a leader, I'm a supreme leader.
Oh yeah, he's got that supreme. I'm telling you what, he's got that drip.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, he's got that drip. Just like that cheeseburger gave Nasrallah, gave him that drip. You know what I mean? But then the bomb hit him, so you didn't have to worry about that. But beyond that, a lot of people are wondering, will that happen? Will Khamenei also end up going the way of the Israeli bomb, or will he end up still surviving a much longer time? And it seems as though a lot of people are saying it's kind of half and half. Once again, everyone's in half of a camp that yes, he will be dead, and some are saying, nah, that would be too extreme. The Israelis will probably hold back. But a lot of people are throwing in their ideas and inputs on this. And Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking about this? Do you think he's next on the chopping block, or do you think they're going to hold off on that one?
All right, so this might be a pretty extreme possibility to kind of consider here, but it is possible because Israel has taken out basically the entire command of Hezbollah, which is one of the largest Iranian proxy forces in the Middle East, and a lot of people did not see that coming. I personally did not see the assassination of Nasrallah coming this quickly. That was actually kind of a shock to me, but a very pleasant shock. But is Khamenei going to be taken out next? It seems like he thinks he might be taken out because he's currently hiding in a bunker, and the official word is he's been moved to a secure location underground. So he's in hiding right now. He's very scared. He thinks Israel's going to come for him very soon. But it looks like 37% of the audience said no, that would be too extreme for Israel to take out the supreme leader of Iran, while 36% said yes, he is certainly next to be eliminated, and 17% said it really depends on the response of the proxies attacking Israel. And on this one, I gotta say, I'm not really sure because the way Israel is behaving right now, it seems like they're going balls to the wall right now. They're taking out anybody they can that's been trying to attack their country, which honestly, I gotta applaud them for that because they're going all the way. They're not holding back. But I'm not really sure if they're going to go this far to take out the supreme leader of Iran. That seems like that could be a very, very large step to take. That would almost force Iran to go to war. So I'm not sure if Israel's ready to go that far, but I'm kind of unsure. I'm kind of with a 10%, kind of like a cop-out answer. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I actually think that may be too extreme, because if they ever wanted to do that, they could have done it up to this point, over the 40 or so years that this proxy war has been going on since the founding of the Islamic Republic, and they never have. So I would actually have to say, in my opinion, and I have a feeling I probably would end up being wrong with this one, but I'll still say it, that might end up being a little too extreme, and Israel may never conduct that kind of action against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Not really sure, though. Things could change, and I could be wrong, but that's what I'd largely go with. I'd have to go with the 37%, say probably too extreme, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could all entirely be wrong with that kind of an idea. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I hope that also explains what we're seeing down here in the Middle East once again, the best we can, because there's a lot going on. I can't really kid around about that, because while we're not putting out a lot of clips and stuff in this area, because we're largely saving most of our clips for Ukraine, which is still the largest ongoing conventional war in the entirety of the world at this point, and the entirety really of this century, we still want to make sure that y'all keep up to date with what's going on down here. It's going to end up being a really big deal coming on up into the future, so we have to make sure to be able to cover it. But of course, we will wait and see what is going to be happening over the next few days. And of course, I got to say this again because I want everyone to know this the best y'all can about what this channel is going to be doing. We are watching like a hawk 24/7 for anything and everything to go down in between Israel and Lebanon. If the Israelis begin to move across the border tomorrow even, we will be live on air within probably 30 minutes or 40 minutes of that ground invasion beginning, and we will be covering everything that we can as it's coming out, because it will be a major ordeal. This will be the first time that we've ever seen Israeli forces conduct any kind of actions inside of Lebanon since the very early 2000s, around 2006 and 2005. And so this will be a major ordeal. And not only that, it is an incredibly major ordeal with how the world is shaped up since then. We are seeing that the Iranians and the Turks are much different countries than they were back then. Iran is even further radicalized, at least governmentally, than they were at the time. Turkey is a lot more radicalized as well, and is almost not even a NATO member. We are seeing that the Russian Federation is trying to play a somewhat active role in the situation occurring in this area, and we're also even seeing, to a limited extent, that the Chinese are trying to extend economic tendrils into the area, which is also playing a different effect as well. It really is, at least on the diplomatic level, the crossroads of the world at this point, point, and all major and minor spheres, and it does appear that this will end up being a major ordeal, at least diplomatically, and probably a history-changing ordeal diplomatically at this point in the century. But with that,
I did see, for whatever it's worth, the Russian foreign minister came out today and said publicly that the Middle East is on the verge of a full-scale war. And obviously, it doesn't take an expert to know that. Like, the Russians can be very stupid and still see that, because you could be blind and see the tensions in the Middle East are really boiling over right now. But I don't know if it's really to the exact point where literally everybody's going to start firing at everyone. I don't think it's there quite yet. But for example, if Israel was to take out Khamenei, the leader of Iran, that would probably be like a catalyst for something like that to happen, in my personal opinion. But the way it is right now, it looks like it may stay limited to the proxy forces versus Israel instead of an all-out, like everybody's going to war in the Middle East.
that may be so, but even still, it probably will be a very tense situation, and there will be a lot of diplomatic plays being made in the periphery of the Middle East by China, the Russians, the United States, and everyone else in between. So this is certainly something to pay heavy attention to, because this could start to dictate the course of the future. And also, let me put it out there. What's at play a little bit to explain why this is such an important thing. From what we can tell, this area is an important one for everyone, and I'll explain why. The oil that flows out of this region is incredibly voluminous. It's the largest amount of oil that flows out of any region in the world outside of the United States. The United States is actually the #1 oil producer in the world, and has really retained that title since the dawn of time, since the first gallons, the first barrels of oil were being pumped out of the ground. America's largely been #1 since then. But nevertheless, this is a very important region, because while we have an unlimited access of oil, and therefore for that reason it seems a little bit silly for us to try and have control over all of the oil in the Middle East, oil is something that is not in great supply for some other countries, specifically the People's Republic of China. Russia has plenty of oil, but their refining abilities are greatly limited, and especially greatly limited due to Ukrainian attacks. But the People's Republic of China is desperate for more oil, and they're desperate for incredibly cheap oil that will be flooded right into their nation, help to boost their economy, because the cheaper transportation of people and materials is, the faster economic activity can be conducted at, and that means a overall net increase in GDP percentages annually. That is a massive thing for the Chinese, because growing their economic base and being able to grow their nation into what they're calling a successful socialist society is something that is a very important tenet of Xi Jinping's nation building, and that plan is supposed to be met by 2049, the centennial of the Chinese Communist Party, and also not the centennial of the Chinese Communist Party, that was actually founded in 1921, but it will be the centennial of the People's Republic of China, which is what everyone knows China as in the modern day. That means if the United States can retain its control over this region and ensure that Iran and its proxies are not able to uproot or really make everyone in the region lose their faith in U.S. security interests and U.S. security assurances, we will be able to keep control over a vital oil resource that the Chinese would have access to if we're not controlling it. And that could greatly destabilize things in the long term and ensure that China is actually able to catch up to the United States, and not only that, maybe even outdo the United States by the year 2049. If we are to lose this area, then we will probably see that the Chinese may end up being the preeminent power in the world. It may rival the United States as a superpower, or may even outdo us. A lot of people are under the misconception that's the case at the moment, but even the People's Republic of China, in their statements during the party's congresses, the Chinese Communist Party's congresses that are held pretty much annually, they have been able to say that they are not up to the level of the United States, and they're planning on being at that level by 2049. So we do know that they're still working towards that, and we have to be able to deny them the oil that's coming out of the Middle East and largely keep that under our control, otherwise they're going to get it. Not only that, resource shortages are still something that are being forecasted into the future. Everyone does have an idea that oil deposits will run out eventually. We don't know when that will be. Everyone's always trying to crystal ball that. Usually everyone's wrong, but oil is not an infinite resource. Oil will eventually start to run out, and there has to be another way another source of energy to be able to keep a nation running at a cheap and efficient level for economic activity to continue to grow. And that's another thing that's very important about controlling the Middle East now and at least well on into the short-term future of about 20 to 30 years out. As oil reserves start to dwindle around the world, it will be very important for the United States to be able to keep hold of a large amount of oil here in the United States, but also abroad, for us to be able to make the transition cheaply and efficiently into other forms of energy to be able to run the nation off of. If the Chinese have access to that, that means that our ability to transition out of oil is actually going to be a lot more difficult and a lot more costly, meaning that economic activity will once again be slowed. If the Chinese have access to the oil, not only are they able to once again grow their economy rapidly, which is what they're hoping for in the short term, and in the short long-term picture, they're also able to make the transition out of oil a lot cheaper and more efficient. Those are the reasons why the United States must ensure that our forces in the area, our allies in the area, continue to keep a stronghold over this region, a stronghold over the oil resources that are in this area, and deny access to them by any foreign powers like the People's Republic of China and any others that may pose a viable risk to Western superiority in the world at the moment, or at least the superiority of the sphere. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well, at least about what's at stake and why it's such an important thing for the United States, not only to support Israel in these actions, but encourage them in weeding out and destroying any of Iran's proxy forces, because if Iran is able to actually uproot the United States from this sphere, Iran is going to be falling entirely into the Chinese sphere. It's already happening at this point, and with the Russians, which the Iranians are also closely tied to, moving into the Chinese sphere, it is a near certainty that if the United States is pushed out and Iran ended up getting control of most of the region, it pretty much means that the Chinese are getting control of the entire region. So that's what's all at play, and that's really the big strategic picture that we're looking at, and that's why this is such a major thing to pay attention to at this point. It has a massive impact for decades on from this point, and from here all the way up till about 2050. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're actually going to be moving on out of the Middle East and on up into Ukraine. But before we get on into the Ukraine war news, there is a lot to talk about. A load of people have been asking tons of questions. And Matthew, what do we have?
All right, so jumping into our first question segment of the night, we have our first super chat, which goes to Kimberly Brokaw, who's a channel legend, who throws in a very generous, the largest super chat of the night, a $100 donation. Huge shout out to you, Kimberly, for that massive support. And she said, take one from the chat and doing a great job.
And thank you so much for the support, Kimberly Brokaw. And thank you for saying that we're doing a good job. I hope that the analysis has been really good tonight, because tonight, I want to make sure to get really heavy into the analysis side of things instead of just reporting the news that we're getting, so that way people can actually understand what's at stake here with what we're watching. It's not really an argument about whether you like the Israelis or whether you like the Palestinians and who owns that land, because it's really more so a pro-Western or anti-Western power play that's being made inside the Middle East, and who is going to control it. Us in the United States and the rest of the Western world, or the Iranians, and then eventually the Chinese. And I have to say that we have to 100% stand by our interests in the Middle East and support the Israelis in these upcoming actions. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping it to be possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to get that kind of message out there. We wouldn't really be able to make it clear what kind of Western interests are at stake and why folks here in America, and not only in America, throughout the rest of the Western sphere in East Asia and Europe, should be fully behind the actions that are being taken in that area right now. And I got to give you a huge thanks for the massive support. The biggest super chat that we've actually seen for a little bit on this channel, and helping it to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible for us to have a voice out here, to be able to say what is going on in the world in terms of the news, and why in the world is important for us to continue to support these kinds of actions that are happening in this area. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And thank you once again for wanting to sponsor a live chat. We will make sure to grab that live chat as well. So Matthew, what do we got?
Also, real quick, did you see that guy, that bot coming here a minute ago, bash us for being clickbait and bash the channel and then donate $12? Did you see that?
I did see that. I was like, I don't know what this is. I was like, I'm very confused by this.
I don't even understand it. I was reading it the first time. I read it 3 times over to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. The guy bashed the channel and donated $12. I have no idea like the logic behind that, but thank you very much for the support.
Dude,
but anyways,
he said, "Screw you, kiss my ass. Here's $12, and I'll see you tomorrow." It's like, no, it's like that's not how that works. It's like I don't know.
I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it at all. Also, I saw someone before we move on, Matthew. I saw someone say, despite Israel's proven war crimes. Oh, right, yeah, like I guess they're the only people committing war crimes in the region. I guess the Hamas forces killing like 2,000 Israeli civilians on October 7th, and then not only that, taking hundreds of hostages and killing about 100 or so of them. I guess that's not a war crime. I guess they're the wholesome ultra chungus group in the Middle East. They never do anything wrong, right? So I guess Israel is the only one that's bad. Like, if we're talking about that on that metric, that's a really goofy one, because while the Israelis have done things that have been questionable, at the same time they're fighting very questionable people, which makes it almost a necessary evil for them to do the things that they've done in the Gaza Strip, to a sense. And not only that, that's acting like the other side is perfectly squeaky clean. They're called terrorists for a reason. There's not really any kind of a gray area where Hezbollah and Hamas may be good people. These are very bad people. Like you may sit there and talk about how bad the Israelis are, but I'll tell you one thing: if you travel to Israel on a plane, you would probably fly back to America pretty easily after your little vacation over there. You fly into, I don't know, well, actually you would have to end up being trucked into the Gaza Strip or the West Bank or into southern Lebanon. You might not end up coming back alive. You might end up coming back in a box, and then a whole bunch of goofballs like you would be going, but they're nice people. And it's like, no, they're not. They're terrorists for a reason. Like, that's what they are. So, like, I'm sorry, like, I don't work on that kind of a metric. And not only that, once again, it boils down to, this is anti-Western forces versus pro-Western forces. Who am I going to support? Obviously, this isn't the movie Avatar. Like, I'm not going to go and betray everyone just because there was, like, a cute-looking blue chick on the other side. This is our survival in the end, and also our strategic imperatives that are at risk. So I'm obviously going to be supporting the Israelis in this conflict, not the group that would want me dead if they could have that. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the live chat question. So what do we got for a live chat, Matthew?
Okay, so the live chat question, sponsored by Kimberly Burkall, is going to go to David Tablet, who says, is there any chance of Iraq and or Jordan getting sucked into this whole situation?
Interestingly enough, there's a decent chance that Iran could get drawn into it simply because they're trying to protect their proxy, or at least take the pressure off of their proxy, assuming that they could take the brunt of Israel's actions. But Jordan, on the other hand, we are fairly certain they're probably not going to get involved, because while Hezbollah rockets did land in northern Jordan, they aren't really a group that is like incredibly supportive of Israel to the point that they would be like America, but at the same time, they don't hate them either. So Jordan will most likely operate completely defensively, shooting down any rockets or missiles that fly over their territory heading towards Israel. But beyond that, they're probably not going to be doing much of anything else in this conflict, rather than sitting back and watching all of it unfold. That's usually how the Jordanians have done in the past, and we assume that they'll probably do something like that again. But they're not an anti-Western nation. They are very deeply entrenched into the Western sphere in the Middle East, as most of their arms and equipment is provided either by the French, the British, or the United States of America. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, or at least with the information that we have at hand about how the Jordanians most likely would interact with the surrounding world. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, Kimberly Brokaw, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to another channel legend. It's Jordy Farah Van Laroven, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Jordy, for that support. And also, I love saying your name. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's a very satisfying name. But thank you very much for that support. He said Coffee Fund and LSA.
And LSA, baby. And thank you for the support to the Coffee Fund and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. I got to thank you for supporting the Coffee Fund, an ancient fund on this channel, and I'm still drinking the Stoke Nitro Cold Brew. You got it. Well, not nitro, but it's a cold brew. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel. You help us to be able to drink the coffee that we use to be hyped up on air. You help us to be able to cover all of the news that we have today, and I got to thank you massively for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, Jordy, and let me make sure, Jordy Farah Laroven, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And also thank you for being one of our Dutch viewers all the way up from the Netherlands. A really cool place, really pretty place, and it has a very interesting history. And so with that, huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news that we have up in Ukraine.
All right, and the last one also goes to Jordy Farah van der Laroven once again.
Hey!
And he put in another $55 donation, and huge shout out to Jordy once again. He said biscuits for the coffee fund, and take one from the chat. Hey, he added biscuits. He had those Biscoff things they like to give you on the plane, which are pretty good. They're pretty good with coffee. But thank you very much, Jordy, once again. That is fire. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And thank you for supporting the biscuits for the coffee fund. We will be getting many Lotus Biscoff biscuits. We love them. We enjoy them. We really enjoy them when we fly on a plane, which we really don't do a lot at all. But when we did, we got them and we were like, hey, this is pretty cool. We were like, we like these things. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again and supporting this channel and helping it keep on running. And thank you also for sponsoring a live chat as well. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so for the live chat question, this one is going to go to Bia Arthur, who said, how will the Israelis get to Iran if Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Iraq say no to the usage of their airspace?
Let's see. Very interesting question here. Let me make sure to reread that one. How will the Israelis get to Iran? Well, the way that they would get to Iran is that they would just simply tell Iraq to get bent. Like, that literally is what it would be. They would just say, whatever, deal with it. They would fly right over Jordan, or they would fly over Syria and then over Iraq, because Iraq and Syria really don't have any competent air defense systems, or at least a large number of them at all. Really, the only air defense systems present in Iraq are air defense systems, if there's any at all, here from the United States. So Israel could just fly through those areas. There's really no way for them to shoot the Israeli aircraft down, fire their weapons into Iran, and then fly back. That's largely the way they would do it, because while permission from a nation is important, at least in the instance of Iraq and Syria, they have really no way to enforce a ban on Israeli aircraft conducting combat operations over their skies, and so for that reason, they probably wouldn't be able to do anything, even if they said, don't do it. The Israelis would just do it anyways, and then the Iraqis and the Syrians would just have to be a little angry about it. But with Saudi Arabia, however, they do have somewhat competent air defense systems in Saudi Arabia, and they could do something to shoot down Israeli aircraft, but they wouldn't want to do that because Saudi Arabia and Israel are really within the same collective pro-Western sphere within the area, or at least Western backed. So they wouldn't want to end up going into a conflict with Israel, because that would start to destabilize the sphere that they largely rely on for security assurances from the United States of America. So we would largely expect that the Saudi airspace would never be completely closed, but with the Iraqis and the Syrians, they just get ignored because they really have no way to even enforce their airspace at all at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well. A very interesting one at that, and a very good hypothetical. And I got to thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Once again, Jordy Farah van Laroven, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And moving on out of this question segment and on into the remainder of the news that we have tonight, that is going to be bringing us up into the Kursk Oblast for the one clip we had today of the Ukrainians hitting some Russians in the Kursk region. Check it out. We got the wolf with the lifting belt here. And we can see them slamming the Russian pontoon bridges in this area. An absolute sadness for the Russians. A terrible day.
Oh, Bliat, it's terrible. How are they going to get across this river now?
Oh, great heavens. Oh, and what's this? The Russians carrying around firewood. Oh, no. No, they're not carrying around firewood. They're carrying around limbs. And the artillery piece they covered them with got blown up.
Oh, they started a little fire. That's not good. Bring out that Smokey the Bear character. They need to get on him.
Man, I wish we could find that stupid Russian Smokey the Bear thing. I forgot what it was, but it was hideous.
It's the French toast, man. Their version of Smokey the Bear.
Blid, don't burn it down, Blid. Something like that. Oh, and they got another one. They got a buhanka. And they blew that thing to pieces.
Pull it in the building, Bliat, while the drone's watching us. We'll be hidden, Bliat.
Man, I'm telling you what, Blid. Oh! Oh, and what's this? Oh, dang, they literally just kind of drove into that one, and it's on fire now and burning.
You know those people like that assault people, and they like for example, like punch somebody in the face. They're like, no, I didn't punch him in the face. His face made contact with my fist. That's like basically what that drone did. No, that tank made contact with my bomb.
It literally did, though. It's like, dude, whack. But also, the people who say that, man, they're like, I didn't throw that at him. He just happened to be in front of it when I threw it. It's like, come on, anyone's going to believe that. It's like you knocked his teeth out. It's like, come on, man. Like, it'd be real. Oh, and they got another one. Oh! Something blew up in the Buhanka and ended up sending little nice sparks around the area. Oh, and again!
Oh, honka, it's honking.
But with that, seeing that clip, beautiful to see. And moving on out of the Kursk area and on down into our location unknowns, we actually had a few interesting ones today, starting off with a Mi-8 helicopter pilot, and look at the little fella. He just loves the guided rocket, although the unguided rockets, actually, technically.
Man, he loves those right there. Look at him. He just sport. I was trying to look at his tennis shoes real quick. I was like, what are those? Like Adidas or something, or a Beavis? I don't know, but it's pretty neat.
Man, I don't know, man. I don't know what those shoes are, but he do be styling. He really do be styling right there. Impressive stuff. Moving on from that, though, and into our next clip, we did get to see a couple of Mi-24s in flight over the beautiful landscape of Ukraine. And just look at them. I know there's some kind of music playing. Okay, that's not what I was expecting, actually. I was expecting something like or something like that. Instead, it sounded like rock almost, but yep, they're flying on along. Look at them go. Really pretty stuff. Really neat to see. And that's the end of that clip. But it's time for us to move on to probably one of the biggest attractions of the night, or at least it's the biggest attraction for us, personally. We're going to be moving y'all into the Russian loss report. And it sure is one hell of a loss report right here. And the losses were incredibly high. Oh my
God! 99 Bobcats. What the hell? Man, that is crazy. Now, I saw this earlier. I must admit, I'm having to like hype myself up some extra because I already saw it. I don't know if this is a typo or not, but whatever it is, to see 99 special equipment in one day, that will probably never be beaten. I don't think so. I think that is going to be a record that's going to be unbeatable, undefeated. But you can see over there, I already left a comment. I said 99 Bobcats, holy moly. And also, Mistisa left some corrections. She's suspicious as well that this might be a typo. So I hope it's not. But if it is, yeah, oh well. But Enforcer, tell us more.
It was an impressive day. It was a day that will never be repeated again. 1,470 Russian troops were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 42 APCs, 0 supply trucks, interestingly enough, 14 main battle tanks, 55 artillery pieces, 62 drones, 4 MLRSs, 2 cruise missiles, and the whopping 99 Bobcat skid steers. An insanely high number. And we haven't been able to debunk this number yet. It appears to actually be accurate at this point, but that is the record of records. It's 4.5 times higher than the previous record that has ever been held. This is an impressive day, and it appears that Ukraine brought the Bobcats justice today. Real, long-lasting justice. And of course, incredible stuff to hear and incredible stuff to see. But moving on from that...
Wait, real quick, Enforcer. I got some pretty big breaking news here. I just saw some information come out right now per the ABC. I'm seeing this on Twitter from Global Military Info. It says Israel has reportedly started a small-scale operation in Lebanon, per ABC, and Hezbollah positions along the border are under attack by Israeli ground forces. And it looks like, I'm trying to find more information here while I'm scanning through, it looks like small versions of a larger scale operation are starting right now, and it might be followed up by a very large movement here shortly. But definitely, there are some small scale operations starting right now.
Oh, oh, interesting. Interesting, right here. Let's see. Small scale. Let's see. Right on
There's not much information on it though. It's just one or two posts. It literally just happened a couple minutes ago, so I'm waiting to see if footage is coming out or any official statements from the Israelis. But considering the fact they have been announcing they are going to go into Lebanon, it sounds like they're doing it in a very conservative way and then following it up with a really big push into Lebanon.
So it looks as though this is the probing action for the major offensive to come. So we're going to put down Israel border probes. This may be reconnaissance forces or a screen that has been put out. Well, not really a screen, but more so a cover force that has been moved up into the area, so that way they can try and figure out what kind of Hezbollah forces are there, how strong they really are, and what to strike. But at this point, we're actually going to be clarifying here on our title that Israel is invading Lebanon, because it seems as though that is now beginning at this very point. While we're live on air, it sounds as though the Israelis are invading Lebanon. So let me change that really quickly to Israel invading Lebanon on the title, and we'll be saving that right there. We might actually end up being on air a little bit longer tonight, so that way we can cover this if it really starts to end up being a major ground offensive that we'll start seeing here within the next few hours. But moving on from that, at least at the moment, and thank you for sharing that massive news, Matty. That is incredibly large, to say the least, and we'll probably see some more news and updates about that here very soon. But moving on from that, and on back into Ukraine and over to our over to the Vovchansk front, we were able to see an interesting amount of action here. We were actually able to see that Kirilo Budanov ended up visiting the front lines today. An interesting clip, to be sure, but a welcome one. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see the Russians continuing to hammer the Vovchansk aggregate plant with glide bombs, as we heard some anime music in the background. But there's the Fab 3000 slamming into the aggregate plant. A pretty significant hit. And very interesting to see that they're continuing to try and wipe out really the only remaining building in the entirety of Vovchansk at this point. That's the end of that clip, but we're going to be moving on from that and into our next one in the Vovchansk area, where we also get to see the 3rd Brigade firing mortars in support of Ukrainian infantry further up. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see the 3rd Brigade moving into their little command HQ, lit up by LEDs inside of a trench. We now see them dropping off the mortar rounds for the mortar to fire off. And we see the 3rd Brigade continuing to fire mortars in support of the infantry further on up at the front. Dang, is that a big mortar?
Damn, man, that's crazy. That's like a Wile E. Coyote-sized mortar.
I'll tell you, man, it's crazy to watch this thing in action. The recoil of it, even. Bang! Dang!
Let's see here. Also, I have another piece of the puzzle here about the situation happening on the Lebanese border right now with Israel's forces. I'm seeing here a new piece of information coming from OSINT Defender that it is confirmed that Israel's defense forces has begun, or they're about to begin, a limited ground operation against Hezbollah in Lebanon, according to several U.S. officials. And apparently armored vehicles and troops have crossed into southern Lebanon at several areas along the border. So not just one distinct area they're crossing through the border, there are multiple areas. So this could be the probing attacks that we're looking for. This could be it, based on what we're reading, with armored vehicles and also limited amounts of troops crossing over the border as we speak right now. So we probably won't have footage for probably maybe another 30 minutes or so until that finally comes out, or maybe even later than that, but it is underway as we speak.
Interesting. I'm trying to see here if I can find some additional information looking around, because it does sound as though we are actually live on air while the invasion begins. And so let's see here if we can find some more news. And I'm trying to go through, seeing all kinds of stuff, hurricanes, all that stuff, Nasrallah dead, others. Let's see. I'm trying to see. I'm not seeing anything else at this point. Let's see here. Alex Jones is
It's
on
literally
Twitter.
just those two shreds of information right now. It's just the one from we're seeing from ABC, and also the statements from the U.S. officials as well. That's all we're hearing. So it's very preliminary, like very, very, very early. So y'all are hearing it here first. I guarantee you that. Nobody said that yet, because it literally just happened.
Yeah, and so we'll actually be putting that down on the map. Sorry, everyone, for that little bit of lag time here on the stream while I was trying to find out more info for myself. But it does appear that this is the beginning of the invasion that we're seeing right now. And I'll say this, the Israelis would not be moving forces across the border if a larger invasion was not to follow. These are the preliminary forces, like I was literally just talking about at the beginning of the stream, the mechanized and light brigades that are moving across and engaging and fixing Hezbollah forces in place, so that way the Israeli artillery and the Israeli Air Force can then target and destroy whatever forces may be resisting the Israeli advance into this area at this point. So it appears that our initial analysis was correct. That was the exact way that the Israeli offensive was going to begin, and we're already starting to see that literally just about less than an hour after I made that analysis live on air. So with that, I hope that does address that well, but to give you all a little bit of a recap of what we're hearing at this point with what's going on live on air, we were hearing that the Israelis had a buildup of forces along the border today, about 12 hours ago. About 10 minutes ago, we started to hear that there was some sort of an engagement happening along the Lebanese border, and now we're getting a more detailed report that multiple engagements are happening, and Israeli forces have breached the Lebanese border in several locations, beginning their advance into southern Lebanon, and we're assuming that this advance will be making it to the area of the banks of the Litani River, just south of the town of Nabatea, at least initially, and then it may expand further from there. But this is an absolutely major piece of news, as this is the beginning of a ground invasion into southern Lebanon. If you have anyone who's interested in what's going on in the Middle East, sleeping around you right now, or not paying attention, get them over here, because we're probably going to be getting updates on this as we continue to cover the Ukraine war news, and I'm sure that many of y'all will not be wanting to miss the live, up-to-date details that we'll be getting as this is going on. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news inside of Ukraine while we wait for more news to develop in that front down in the Middle East. But up in the Kupiansk area, we were able to hear that Russian forces were getting hit by the Ukrainians' drone forces, and specifically by the SBU. There's a Mr. S right there.
This is Bay Bay.
Bay. And we see the Mr. S right there just chilling. And then it's about to be grilling. Oh! And they hit it dead on the nail. Right on the side of the turret. The Mr. freaks out. It starts trying to run away. But it's not going to be running for long. Oh, it's really running. It's like picking it up. And it ain't going to make it. Oh! And the ammo immediately starts exploding in the turret. It's turned into Hell Rider now.
And it's being jet powered now. It's being pushed along by pure fury. I guess you could say that thing is booking it. Like, it's still going. Jeez. You know they're burning up in there. They're wishing they had some AC.
Man, I'm telling you, the heater's working real well these days.
Man, it's like that school bus heater. You know that one that'll burn your leg off? Like that really bad heater? Man, it's like that.
Oh my goodness, dude. I forgot about that heater. Dude, your leg would literally like get third-degree burns if it got too close to that thing.
It would. It was like almost like a war crime on the back of your leg or something. It would give you like third-degree burns.
Man, they were sitting there burning your leg. You hear a kid go, ah! or something like that. It's like a prisoner of war camp up on those buses sometimes. But anyways, moving on from that and into Svatove, we also got to see a field depot getting hit by some bombs. Check this out. Oh, right by the little depot. Oh, and another one. Can we get a third one? Oh, and there's a Russian crawling around down there. And here goes another one. Bam! Dead on the nail. And another one. That was a little bit of an explosion. Perhaps another one. Oh, that one's burning quite brightly. It's even got a purple haze going on there. we do
Man,
not
the lack of
condone.
news is killing me right now. Like I'm sitting here like scouring every source I know about right now, trying to find more news about this incursion over the border into Lebanon. There's literally nothing. It was like they gave us a little bit here to like get excited about to figure out what was happening, and now there's literal like radio silence. Like it's nothing.
Man, I hope that there's some people down there that got some cameras on their phone and start filming some and uploading it, because we got to have some. It's beginning right now. We know it's happening at this point. It's just that we have no video or picture evidence of it at all. But we're getting reports that it is going down at this very moment. But moving on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting a Russian tank in this area with a Stugna P. This is the 66th Brigade. And we see them firing right there, and the Stugna travels on along, slamming the tank dead on the side. Bam! Taking it out. The crew was already running for the hills before the tank even got hit. Bam! And here goes another one. They're going to finish it off now. Oh! Finishing it off like Hot Dog Man's channel, just going down and out for the count. But there we go. We have another missile hitting another tank in the area. They are going to town with the Stugnas. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Really nice to see and good to know that they were able to knock out another main battle tank in that area. Moving on from that and down towards Kremenna, we also got to see the Russians getting hit pretty hard by the 60th Mechanized Brigade as they try to make a run towards Turney outside of the Kremenna forest. Well, you see that the bomb is armed on the bottom of the screen, and low battery flashes about. And there goes the BMP. Oh, with the crew on top and everything. Very sad day for them. Mr. Bean would be displeased.
What did Mr. Bean always used to say?
Oh, something like that. Like,
Yeah, it was a joke. I was about to say he doesn't say anything. I thought you were about to say, he doesn't say anything. It's like, I think at one point he did make noises or something like that.
yeah, he would go, oh, or something like that. It was like, that was all he would do. That's all he would do, man. It's like, please talk, man. But that was the comedy of it. He just didn't talk. And that's what made him so interesting of a character. But moving on out of the Kremenna forest and a little bit further on down the line and towards Soledar, we also got to see that the Russians ended up obliterating their own surrendering men. Why would they do something like this? Probably to make sure that others don't surrender, but still interesting to see. We can see them being processed here, and we see the Russians laying down on the ground as they surrender to the Ukrainians. And we see the Ukrainian drone filming it as they take them on back away from the lines. And the Russians hit the entire group with artillery and end up wounding and killing a good amount of them. When you see the remainder that were kind of in front of the blast, getting down and continuing to try and run away while being under artillery fire from their own forces that they just surrendered from. We can see another hit hitting dead on. In taking out a good bit of them. But once again showing us the brutality of the Russian armed forces. They will be more than happy to wipe out their own people if they end up surrendering, something that is a protected action by the rules of war, yet the Russians don't even respect their own soldiers when taking that action of surrendering to the Ukrainians. An absolutely barbaric and brutal armed force in a nation, if we've ever really seen one. But moving on from that and into the next bit of news that we have further down the line in Toretsk, we also get to see that the border guards ended up destroying a couple of drones in this area. Dang! Copyright ensues. But we can see here one of the drones that was taken out. See them showing more drones that have been taken down. One right there. Luke Bauer said, wow, I just witnessed a war crime. Man, welcome to the club. I've seen thousands of them. But we can see here more drones that have been destroyed. Man, if you think that's a war crime, you should see what Matthew and me see behind the scenes every day. I mean, you'll see war crimes all the time. But moving on from that and out of that clip and into our next one, on towards the eastern side of Toretsk, we also get to see some of the fighting as it's been occurring in the city of Toretsk, filmed by the Ukrainian police. Oh, they got some interesting music. It almost sounds like Frostpunk in here. The city must survive. And boy, howdy, is the city surviving. Look at it. The Ukrainian police are about to show y'all what it's looking like down there in the streets. Fires rage in different parts of the town.
It was a smoky day that day that the Popo decided to unleash the hell on the enemy.
Man, the police said, police, open up! And just a little firebomb like half the town. The Russians did the other half.
These are not your usual police. These are like basically like militarized police.
Man. And they really are putting a beating down there. We can actually see the theater there destroyed in the fighting. And now a wide shot of the city of Toretsk while the fighting goes on right under the drone. Fires are raging out in the suburbs, or really the neighborhoods of the city of Toretsk. And the video clip ends, but still giving us a really good look at the city of Toretsk and what's going on in that area. Moving on from that and down towards Pokrovsk, we also got to see Russian making a little bit of a race in a golf cart, and it was a very close race. We can see that they have their electronic warfare system mounted onto the hood of the golf cart, or the truck more so. We see them firing at an incoming drone.
Наблюдаю, нету. Не-не-не, ушла направо.
We see them continuing to drive on here, about as fast as they can, actually. See him starting to fire at it again as it's once again popped up on the chase. We see him reloading here. As the truck takes some really violent turns. He still hasn't loaded the mag. He's desperately trying to load the mag. He gets back to shooting at the drone wildly. It doesn't really look like he's hitting anything. The truck's also going off-road, throwing up dirt and everything. And that drone is just stalking him. Oh!
Crap.
It missed him by inches. Next time, it'll get him. Also, someone said, whose POV is this? This was a Russian POV of a Ukrainian drone chasing him down. But moving on from that clip and into our next one in the Pokrovsk area, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians around this area quite heavily earlier. And we can see them dropping a bomb right there. And oh my goodness. Well, the whole area went up. Call that a zip code deleter right there. That was actually pretty impressive. And we can see it from a distance right there, too. Oh, wow. And that's the end of that clip. A really short one, but an impressive one, nevertheless. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see a Russian truck getting hit right down here. And when I mean truck, I mean, you know, the usual share. The Lada of a sort, the Lada Niva.
Also, by the way, while we're watching this right here, I'm still scouring for more news in the Middle East and the Lebanon border situation. We are getting more confirmation, it looks like from Israeli channels as well, that some small-scale border movements are happening into Lebanon, but we still have no video evidence or picture evidence or official statements directly from Israel's command themselves. So it looks like what's happening is right now they're keeping really, really good OPSEC on what they're doing. And Israel, I must admit, Israel is actually much better OPSEC than Ukraine by a lot. But Israel does have a lot more resources to actually like maintain that OPSEC. But it looks like right now, basically nothing's coming out anywhere. It looks like also some live cams are being either jammed or turned off or something like that to prevent people from seeing what's happening at some points of the border. So it is happening. We just don't get to see it right now.
That is unfortunate. I wish we could. We'll probably get a lot of footage about that tomorrow. So sadly, we won't be able to really cover that live like we would with anything going on in Ukraine. But moving on from that, we did get to see the 15th Brigade also repelling the Russians in a very similar area near Pokrovsk. We can see a Russian advance happening right here, making its way towards the Ukrainian positions. And in a second, it will be repulsed, as they say. And we can see them now under fire. And an FPV drone coming in and getting that nice, right on the side hit, right through the armor, into the crew compartment in the turret, knocking out pretty much everyone, and sending the BMP into a wild frenzy to try and run away while some people are still around. We can see some of the people inside the BMP bailing out. We can see them continuing to lay down fire onto the Russians that have abandoned the vehicle. And we can see a FPV drone coming down and slamming into it once again to set it on fire and to start completely destroying the vehicle. And we see there another hit, and of course the Russian attack was completely repelled. Really nice to see, and good to know the Ukrainians are still doing a very effective job up in the area of Pokrovsk. We also got to see a T-62M getting hit pretty hard, just a little bit south. And we see first, the first FPV drone just right into a trench and blowing up, and then we can see another one doing the same thing. And another one. And another one. And another one. And now, finally, on to the cream of the crop, the T-62M, the old piece of garbage, getting hit time and time again until it eventually blows up.
I like how this drone's called Zelenskyy US.
Man, they named them creative names, man. I like to call mine Bober Kurva, or something like that.
That's like somebody who's like English may not be their first language or something like that. Somebody called Bobby. They're like, oh, it's Bobbery.
The Bober. And we see them finally catching the T-62M on fire and burning that thing down to the ground. Wonderful to see, and we love to see it. We love to know it. You know what I mean? It's wonderful. And so moving on from that and on down towards Marinka, we also get to see a javelin strike hitting a T-72B3. And we're going to be muting the trap. Please show us the video, but hold the trap. And we can see here that the javelin hit the tank dead on, right down there. Bing! And it's gone. That's it for that T-72. It's now smoking and burning and churning and turning. Turning into rust. Oh! And that's the end of that clip, but another good one to see. You get them, Ukraine, you get them. Moving on from that and down into Volodar, we also get to see an incendiary being thrown at Volodar by the Russians tonight.
Right now. Hey.
And that's the end of that clip, but still showing us that the Russians are trying to uproot the Ukrainians from Volodar, but still are completely unsuccessful. Moving a little bit further on and into Staromanivka, we also got to see Russians getting hit pretty heavily in this And that music absolutely made my ears bleed right there. We could see some more hits, long-lasting hits.
Long-lasting ammunition. Long-lasting. Oh, dear.
Oh.
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 Short-lasting. Oh,
Well, I mean, I'm sure he was just a little winded is all. But we can see here more drones hitting around the surrounding area.
Oh, fast fellows.
Really fast fellows. Long-lasting fellows.
Look at that trash heap over there next to that bin.
Man. Look at that trash heap next to that bin. That's a quote of the year right there, man.
Oh. This is the the horsey spitting fire brigade.
It's something along those lines. Oh, and we can see them taking a little jog there. And we see this drone just lying in wait like a predator, like Diddy. I mean, you see it finally flying through the trees and slamming down right where it needs to, hitting dead on the nail. And we see them once again running for the hills as the Ukrainian drone comes down towards them, making sure to savor the moment and savor the flavor. And there goes the drone. Bam! Right on the nail. Oh? Oh? Oh! 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 Well, that's the end of that clip, but still, nice to see they were able to inflict some damage. But moving on from that and into Rabotny, we also get to see some Russian forces getting hit down here. Oh, that's really copyright. Wake up with my woman, cause she never helped me with my mind. Or something like that, I don't know. But anyways, we can see them slamming the Russians down here. This is near the Surovikin line, actually. Near Rabotny, believe it. And we can see them going after the artillery piece now, bringing that drone on in to slam dead on the nail. And boom! A dead-on impact. A little bit of lag in the video, not on our stream, but on that video, actually. And we see them going after another one here. And we see them doing it again and again. And again. Long-lasting counter battery. We see them hitting him again.
Man, they got some crazy lag in this video. Like, it's making me think the stream's lagging out.
Yeah, almost me too, man. I'm like sitting here, I'm hoping that I'm not seeing in a second that YouTube says we're lagging. We see them coming down on the Mr. B. That's what they're going to call Diddy in prison. They're going to call him Mr. B. For bitch. but anyways.
Man, he's the type guy to drop the soap just to pick it up multiple times.
Man, Diddy the kind of fella. It's going to move from Drake's the kind of fella to Diddy's the kind of fella. It's going to start turning into that. And boom, another hit. Someone said, why aren't any people defending these guns? Usually they really have no way, so the crew just runs away, and if the piece gets hit, it gets hit. But we can see them hitting it again, and that's the end of the clip. But the Ronin was going to work today. Love to see it, and they're really clocking in those hours. But moving on out of Robotny and down towards Kherson, we also got one clip from this area of Russian forces getting hit once again by more drones. You knew it. It was more drones. Alright, Christmas and Halloween have arrived in the soundtrack, and we can now see a giant golden ring of fire showing up on the screen. The first circle of hell. The first circle of Dante's Inferno. But we can see here more strikes being made, slamming on down, just blowing things away. Bam! Look at that. And that's the end of that clip, but hey, we love to see it, don't we? Wonderful stuff, good to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on out of the area of Kherson and up to Kyiv, because we actually have an air defense report that was pretty good. Out of everything that flew in last night, 69 Shahed 136s were shot down, nice, and 2 X-59s were also shot down as well. And that was also reflected, not so much in the casualty report, but still nice to see that they were able to conduct a very good air defense last night. And without further ado, we are now moving on to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 948 of the war. And it's not an incredibly long one, very sadly for me. But with that, let's get to it. Speech!
Speech time, speech.
Повертаємось додому зі Сполучених
Hold up, there's no subtitles. Dang. Playback speed. Normal? Okay. All right. And then we want these in English. Auto-translate. English. There we go. And here we go. And here's the speech.
Повертаємось додому зі Сполучених Штатів. Багато завдань за цей візит реалізували. Дякую президенту Байдену за найбільший за увесь час пакет підтримки. Майже 8 мільярдів доларів. Це зброя для фронту і ППО для наших міст і розширення тренувальної місії F-16. Я представив план перемоги, і ми домовились, що вже незабаром у Німеччині у форматі Рамштайну обговоримо наші кроки разом з союзниками. Жовтень – час рішень. Маємо зараз важливе продовження комплексу безпекових угод. Тепер декларація G7+, щодо відбудови. Чіткий сигнал, що разом з союзниками відновимо нормальне життя після війни. Більш ніж 30 країн, і вже з Україною у цьому. Будуть і двосторонні домовленості. Будемо збільшувати кількість країн. Дякую Сполученим Штатам і президенту Байдену за це лідерство. Дякую Конгресу Сполучених Штатів за незмінну двопартійну підтримку і бажання нам допомогти виграти. Сенатори, члени Палати представників, всі, хто бачить, як багато можемо зробити разом. Ми отримали повну підтримку стратегії наближення миру завдяки силі. І як і було важливо для України, провели зустрічі з обома кандидатами у президенти США. Зустріч з Камалою Гарріс. Всі важливі акценти прозвучали, майже годинна розмова. Зустріч з Дональдом Трампом. Це друга наша зустріч з 2019 року. І саме зараз, коли так важливо. Дякую за увагу до деталей нашого плану перемоги. Дякую всім, хто допомагає зупиняти російський терор. І хто розуміє, що лише силою можна примусити Росію поважати правила і дотримуватись базових документів світу. Життя базується на принципах і законі тоді, коли не можна його зруйнувати насильством. І саме тому так потрібна єдність. Єдність союзників, єдність світу, щоб зупинити Росію, цю війну, і гарантувати справжній чесний мир. Мир, якого Україна хоче більш, ніж будь-хто у світі. І який обов'язково буде. Слава Україні!
Rom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the...
Rome Slava.
Hey,
I was dying to get to the mute button, man. The mute was muted the whole time. I couldn't even get it undone.
Man, the mute be muting. But beyond that, I gotta say, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Absolutely wonderful. An incredible and interesting speech at that, a very short one. But once again, recapping this American visit that he made and everything that happened in the meantime. And it seems as though something very interesting happened today. Now, Matthew, I think if I'm hearing this correctly, it seems as though all sides in America, just put this out there just to make sure I'm getting this correct because I didn't talk to you about this before the show. But it seems like now all sides in America are united in the idea of supporting Ukraine with what they need to be able to keep fighting the war, if I'm remembering kind of the synopsis of what I saw on that today at a quick glance.
Yes, so basically the short rundown is Zelenskyy met with both U.S. presidential candidates, and regardless of what the public rhetoric is, Zelenskyy says out of his own mouth that they have both assured him that Ukraine will be supported into the foreseeable future, regardless of who wins the election, and that's coming directly from Zelenskyy meeting with both presidential candidates. So regardless of how you feel about either one of them, I will say it's very good to hear that the commitments have been made, at least in private, that Ukraine will be supported in the future. That's the most important thing. Who cares what they say at the end? As long as Ukraine is supported, that's all that really matters. So hopefully that will be the case.
And I gotta say this, of course, we'll have to see how that largely unfolds, but one thing I will say is that if that ends up being true, like if we have to see that pans out to be true, that will be something that I'll have to say I told everyone so on that one, because that's largely how it goes. I see some people saying they don't believe that, and I feel like domestic political things about to start flooding over into the chat here in a second, and once again, we have a rule against that. But one thing I was wanting to say about that today is that I did tell y'all a while ago, and I've been telling y'all now for about the entirety of this year, that regardless of whoever would win the election, you would see that in the end they would continue to support for Ukraine like the other would, and you would see that a lot of people would come out that were for the war now and they would be against it, and then the people who were against the war initially would be for the war. That's always how it works. That's just how it goes. And so I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, because it looks as though that is certainly starting to go that direction where it doesn't really matter which side would win, the war will continue on as it is. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I see a lot of people saying, no, they won't. Look, we can only go off of what people say. Like, if they're lying, they're lying. But that's what they said. Apparently, straight to Zelenskyy, that's what Zelensky's saying. So if you're saying that's wrong, you're saying Zelensky's lying. So I don't know. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest there, maybe with some. But that is what it is. Like, I'm not for or against either candidate. Publicly, one thing I will say is that it was quite obvious that both of them were going to be supporting the war in Ukraine, whether their rhetoric is opposite or not in the public. Because just to remind y'all all, the rhetoric is always opposite depending on what the other one is doing. Because I remember at the beginning of the war, for the first 2 months, when the current administration was doing nothing, it was the other side that was saying that the current president was weak and worthless, and that they couldn't do squat, and that they were going to let everything that America had built since World War II fall into collapse because they were too weak to do anything. And then once military support started to flow to Ukraine, and then everyone went that the current president is a warmonger trying to get everyone in the Third World War and get everyone killed, and that's why he shouldn't be president, or something along those lines. And that's exactly how it's going to go with this, because now we're hearing, as of course the time draws down to the election, that both sides will support the war in Ukraine, and it largely will end up being the case. I'm fairly certain of that. Been saying that for about a year. Have no reason to doubt that. It just makes sense as a strategic imperative for the United States. That wouldn't make a lot of sense if that was not the case. And so then we'll see that maybe, let's just say hypothetically, the other side that's not in right now and gets elected and they become president, they will continue to support the war in Ukraine. And then the current side that's in right now, that will no longer be the president, will start to say that the now sitting president that may be elected is a warmonger and he's trying to get everyone dragged into World War III and killed, because that's exactly how it goes on every single thing. And I'm not I'm not at all here to argue it, because I know a lot of people are going to get into the whole domestic political side of things. This is just how it works. Like back when the Wuhan whirlybird was around and people were trying to come up with a way to inoculate people against that, originally the group that did that did it very quickly, which was somewhat questionable, and the side that wasn't in charge at the time said that they weren't going to take it because it was made by an incredibly dangerous administration and it was going to get everyone killed, and there was probably a lot wrong with it. And then that group got elected, and then their guy became president, and then they said that this inoculation is completely safe, it's completely perfect, everyone should take it. And then the other side that was kind of pushing it at the start, and then started to say that there's absolutely nothing at all to it, it's all hogwash, and it's going to get everyone killed because it was made by an unsafe administration in the government. That's how everything goes. Like, if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. But that's how it works. It wasn't in doubt at all, in my opinion, that both sides would end up saying that they would support Ukraine, because it was obvious that they were. It's obvious that it's obvious, like, to me, I'm just going to tell you this, if the current side wins again, they're going to act like they're just geniuses and the war in Ukraine is wonderful. And then if they lose, they're then going to act like the war in Ukraine is terrible and it should end immediately, even though if they got elected again, they would openly support it and continue to keep weapons going to Ukraine. That's just how the game works. So with that, I hope that does.
Also, by the way, I saw some people asking for the source. Where do we hear this, that
From
both sides are
Zelenskyy.
supporting Ukraine? This was from an exclusive interview done with Zelenskyy himself on Fox News. And of course, everybody's going to say, oh, God, it's Fox News. But ultimately, it came from Zelensky's mouth, these statements. So he said that. So, you know, honestly, I just got to say this once again. I see people getting very violent in the live chat and stuff like that. Oh, God, it's so-and-so. I have my own opinions as well, and I could hash these out all day with y'all. Also, like, I share some of the beliefs of people in the live chat that are currently saying. But the catch with it is, we can't get so blinded by, like, our dislike for someone or one candidate that we get so blinded that we miss the forest for the trees, per se. Because the point we want is we want Ukraine to be supported so that way Russia does not defeat a sovereign country. That's the most important thing right now. And I got to give credit where credit's due. Both candidates are supporting that right now, and that's a very good thing. Hopefully it stays that way. Now, if it turns out to be a lie, obviously it's going to be very irritating, and more than that, it'll be detrimental to Ukraine. But we have to go based on what we're hearing from Zelenskyy right now, and it's very positive. So I must say, very good.
And also, really quickly, I gotta say that some people are saying, oh, this is political. It's not, because I'm talking about both sides equally. So this is a very fair assessment. This falls within our no politics rule. This is what I've been saying for years. And I know this. I'll be honest, I know this, because there's some very vehement voices saying that they absolutely don't believe this, like what has unfolded today and transpired with that. And I know, because a lot of people are really heavily charged in the domestic political sphere, and so they don't want to believe that both sides would end up largely supporting an American interest. Even if they said it out of their mouths, they're going to believe that's not the case, and they're going to believe that the side that they're not on wants to kill everyone and eat their children, or something along those lines. That's how modern American politics works, at least for the public. But in the background, everyone's largely on the same page, no matter what they say publicly. Everyone was on the page that the inoculation was a thing that had to be distributed to the entirety of the public during the Wuhan whirlybird. That, whether people like that or not, that's the case. Like, some people are going to say that that's not true, and I would have to disagree, because both the current president and the former president both took the inoculation, clearly proving my point. The former president even brought it up at a rally and got booed by his own supporters because, of course, everyone drinks the Kool-Aid. No one even remembers that that was a thing that happened. Another thing is exactly with this. If for some reason, just putting that out there, if the other side got elected, they're going to end up supporting the war. And then the side that's currently in charge right now will go to hating the war and acting like it's absolutely terrible. That's just how this thing works. Like, I know it's going to happen that way. That's not getting political. That's literally talking about it fair across the board, because that's just how it works on all sides. That's how it's worked the entire time I've been alive. And anyone who can recognize patterns will see that that's exactly the pattern that will be followed. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here, we do have one more poll to address, and we are jumping right into it. It's about Israel. It says, do you think Israel is about to follow up from their probing attacks, which are currently happening as we speak? Are they going to follow up with a full-scale invasion of Lebanon? So about 74%, the overwhelming majority, said yes, it's coming very soon, while 13% said no, it's going to remain very limited to probing attacks, and 6% said, we need much more info. And I must say, it would be very nice if we did have more information, because right now I can't find anything else. There's only the confirmation from U.S. officials that something is happening. And right now, the U.S. is the only country to actually confirm that something is happening. Israel themselves hasn't even made a statement just yet. So I'll say that they're probably going to follow up with a full-scale invasion very soon, or otherwise, why would they be doing probing attacks? But you never know. But I'm actually with the majority here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's coming very soon. I'm sure that the ground invasion will probably be happening tomorrow in the middle of the day, and if that's so, we will be covering that when it happens. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, really quickly, before we move on to the next one, I do have to quickly say that we do not allow politics. And I know so many people are about to go, what? But you brought it up! Because I said something fair about both sides without picking a side and just telling you how it works. And so some people are going to assume that for some reason that's a domestic political point that's biased, although it's completely unbiased, but we don't do politics here. If you like one candidate over the other, I highly encourage you to exercise your right as an American citizen and go vote in the upcoming presidential election in November. However, this is not the place nor the time to be talking about domestic political politics and who you like and who you're going to vote for. We are entirely in support of Western interests around the world. We do not get involved in domestic political politics, and we also do not get involved in anything that ends up dividing people needlessly. What we are saying, as far as what happened today with the statements that Zelenskyy made about talking to both candidates for the President of the United States, is that there is good news. It appears that both sides both agree that Ukraine support is important and that they will back Ukraine and support them on into the future. Whether they're lying or not is another thing, and that's up for y'all to decide. But as far as the actual official statements, which we have to take at face value on this channel because we did, and we'd be breaking the rule that we've had for 3 years, that official statements from government sources, political candidates, both being considered government sources, are true. We have to take that at face value and say that those statements are true. So as far as we know right now, we have to commend both sides equally. Both of them have America's interest at heart and Western interests at heart abroad, at least according to their public statements at the moment. And that is a very big success and a victory for the pro-Western world and for the pro-Ukrainian world today to hear a statement like that. Now, once again, I have to say, if that doesn't end up being true, then of course that's not the case. But on the public statement today that we have to take at face value because of the rules we've laid out on this channel and have followed to a letter for 3 years, we have to take the statements at face value. Like, I can't say because some people may not like this candidate, we have to assume they're lying, or vice versa on the other candidate. We have to take everything that they say at face value. Every single thing. That's how we've always run the channel. Like when we bring out U.S. government statements, we take them at face value. Very rarely do we say things like the U.S. government is probably like sugarcoating this or trying to mislead for some reason. And that's only when we actually have written proof that they would be misleading the public to some reason off of some sort of common knowledge. Like the joint standoff weapon, the JSOW being a glide bomb instead of a cruise missile. That's something that was a publicly misleading thing that we had to correct on air. But beyond that, this is what we do. This is just how we cover the news. And I see a lot of people not liking it. Like, look, like I just got to say this. I don't go around, like, I really don't care for, like, I'll just be honest, I don't really care for either candidate. Honestly, I dislike them equally. Like, just being honest with everyone here, so that way you'll get a fairly good disclaimer that I'm not really rooting for one or the other. But one thing I will say is that when I hear something that both of them are saying that is within the West's interest, I will commend them. Like, I don't really like either of them, but I will commend them quite well and say they're doing a great job. It's a good thing to hear that they're both willing to support Ukraine. Hopefully that expands on into other spheres. We've heard both sides largely support Israel, which is a good thing. We've heard both sides largely support Taiwan. So at least as far as the upcoming election is concerned in the process of this channel, it doesn't really matter who gets elected, because based off of their public statements, they're both going to do the same things in support of Western interests. So really, for y'all, it's up on the domestic political side, and we do not get into that at all, and we do not support any discussions of that at all here on this channel either. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I hope that kind of puts that out there, why that statement was made, because I'm hoping that instead of, for some reason, people getting kind of angry about that, y'all will be very happy to hear that regardless of what happens here in the upcoming election, from what we know, nothing is going to change in terms of how the war is going in Ukraine. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that, we're moving away from our polls. We're fresh out, and we're moving on now to our Super Chat segment, the final one of the stream right here. And this one is going to go to Rad Doctor, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Rad Doctor, for that support. They said, my Saturday nights suck because of busy ERs, and I hope you're having a better shift than me.
Dang, and Rad Doctor, you are the doctor with the rads. And I gotta say, that's really nice to hear. And I gotta thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope you're having a little bit less of a busy night. I'm guessing not, because you brought it up that it sucks because it's really busy. I guess people are getting into all kinds of devilment and mischief out there on the weekends, but I still thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. For us to say the stuff we say on air, for us to do the stuff we do on stream all the time, and with our videos, none of this would be possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who helped make this thing possible. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one. But before we do, I saw Bobo Vasquez say something interesting. He said, it's really hard to keep politics out of this discussion because of the candidates' rhetoric, though you were doing a great job navigating the landscape. I would actually say it's very easy to keep it out, because what does it matter? Like to me, like, just to argue my point here and kind of have my say, and once again, heavily advocating for channels like mine across YouTube, keeping a very neutral political stance. What does it matter what the candidates are saying? Now that seems weird to say, but let me explain. Regardless of what they're saying, does that really change my stance on this channel, whether I'm pro-Ukrainian or not? It doesn't actually at all. And so it doesn't really matter if a candidate's saying they love Ukraine or they want to stomp Ukraine into the dirt. Like, all I'm saying is I support Ukraine. That's it. I'm not picking a side with that. I'm not saying that this one side is devil if asked for salary or anything like that. I'm just saying, I'm just saying I support Ukraine. However the chips fall, but I'm not going to get concerned with how the chips are falling. That's really how we've been doing it on this channel. And, you know, and why we brought this whole thing up tonight about both candidates saying they support Ukraine is because now that isn't really, at least according to Zelenskyy, a topic, a discussion to even be had about Ukraine, from what we know, according to him, because he talked to him. I mean, like, if anyone's going to have the scoop on this, it's him. He talked to both of them for at least an hour or two each. And he ended up getting the same thing from both of them. They are going to militarily support Ukraine on in the future. And that's what we have.
And we've both been saying that. We've both been saying that as well. I've been saying that I think that Ukraine support will continue no matter what. And also, something I think people really don't understand to a complete level is when you have a U.S. president, and this is going to be purely like theory talk. This is not about like particular candidates or anything like that. But when you have a U.S. president, they are the figurehead of the country. They do have their own personal ideas, but I don't think many people understand the amount of pressure that is put on U.S. presidents to make certain decisions that other people really want them to make. Like, for example, there is an entire bureaucracy in the executive branch. Like, for example, the intelligence guys, the investigative domestic guys like the FBI, all these agencies put weight on the executive to do certain things. That's the way it works. I'm not sure if it was designed to work that way, but that's sort of the way it works. And these agencies will put pressure on the president to do certain things and push for certain agendas. And sometimes the president, being sort of swayed very heavily by this, will be like, okay, if we need to do that and it's like imperative that we do it, we'll just give in and we'll cave to the wishes of the bureaucracy. I think with all the people in place currently in the government, Ukraine will always get support because there'll be a lot of pressure from the military industry as well as the people that are already in bureaucracy to basically keep that support flowing to Ukraine. It's in the United States' economic interest to keep that going. So whatever the rhetoric is floating around from any candidate, ultimately, that usually is not what the actual policies will be once they get in office. They say whatever they need to get elected. Like, y'all will know, like, if you've been around a long time, they say all kinds of stuff, make wild promises that never come true. That's just the way it works. And sometimes it's stuff that's negative and sometimes it's stuff that's positive. I just don't think that Ukraine support's ever going to stop personally, no matter who gets elected.
Like, another thing I have to bring up, like, this is one that I could bring up as a good example. So let's let me bring up 2 points. I'm bringing these up, and they're going to be fair. I just got to put this out there. It's going to be on both sides, but I'm going to bring up things that they said that they were going to do, and then they didn't do them, and then they dropped them because, or they did the opposite because they have to, because there's a certain thing that the country needs. One person said that we were going to end up building a pretty massive structure in the southern area of the United States, and that a foreign country that borders us in the south was going to end up paying for that. And they never got them to pay for that. Like, we didn't even really build a lot of it, but no, like, the country that borders us to the south didn't pay for that at all, and now that entire idea, that entire concept has been dropped, because there's no way to force them to do something like that. So it was just a speaking point to get in, and then nothing really followed through with that much at all. Another one that happened with the current sitting administration, just to throw out another example, is that they said oil is bad, and we're going to be cutting down the amount of oil production that's happening here in America. And then over the past 4 years or so, they've actually approved more drilling licenses than I believe the prior administration, if I'm correct. And we have started to produce even more oil because oil supplies from overseas aren't as plentiful or easily accessible at this point, at least in certain areas. And so we had to start relying more on domestic production. Once again, a complete reversal of something that was said to be elected. Some like what people say in the election cycle on both sides really does not have much of an impact, because there are certain national prerogatives that must be done, or certain things that just aren't possible. And you'll see that they largely have to respond to the ebb and flow. That's why I just don't really care. Like you know, when people really get into like drinking the Kool-Aid on both sides and believing that the other side is the devil, like, I just don't believe that, because I see through it. You know, and it's well-intentioned people, like, all of them are well-intentioned. A lot of them end up having to do the exact same things as the other, because it's the only thing you can do in that situation, and supporting Ukraine is obviously the only thing that you can do in this situation. Obviously, America's not going to let the Russians win. Like, that's just something we can't do.
And also, not to mention, money talks. So when you have, for example, tons of military industrial lobbyists running around in D.C., they're there for a reason. And right now, the military industry in the United States is making very big bucks based on supplying new weaponry to the U.S. military, while the U.S. military is sending their old equipment over to Ukraine. It's causing the U.S. to buy more equipment in mass, and that's why the current defense stocks in the U.S. are doing so well. So those lobbyists are in high gear right now to make sure that everybody's in place currently to put as much pressure as possible on the incoming president to make sure that this thing keeps going. It sounds kind of sick, but that's really the way it works. The lobbyists just simply go in there and they do what they're told, as the old saying goes, and money talks. So money starts getting flung around here and there. Certain PACs start giving money, and all of a sudden, no matter what the candidates said about how much they hate Ukraine or how much they love Putin, all of a sudden Ukraine gets the support they need out of the blue. That's just the way it works.
And also, I see some other people saying some really interesting stuff. Let's see here. U.S. still importing oil. It uses so much. Yeah, we actually import a lot of oil, but still at the same time, we had to increase a lot of domestic production, because let me explain what actually happened with that, so that way it makes a lot more sense than what I was saying. So the party that the group that we're talking about, and once again, this is a fair analysis. I'm just bringing this up as the singular example. We kind of fleshed out the other one with a whole mega structure on the southern border fairly well. But with this group, they said that they were going to come in and they were going to start slashing oil production, because oil is filthy, oil is nasty, and we need to start moving towards a cleaner standard. And so they get elected, and then they sit there. And of course, the economy has to keep running, because regardless whether our ambitions to do one thing or the other, we have to make sure that the GDP continues to grow, because we continue to have to keep in mind that there are rivals like China that will eat our lunch if we don't try and remain on top of the world and keep some sort of a supremacy or a primacy. And so then they sit there and observe that oil access around the world isn't as good as it was when they were brought in. So the national imperative is that they must keep the economy running. The nation must survive. And so for that reason, they start to approve more oil drilling leases. Is that a bad thing? Like, honestly, no. I mean, like, that's not really that bad of a thing. Like, you know, some people may have objections to oil. Some people may love it. But in terms of keeping the nation running and keeping national prerogatives in mind, that's not a bad thing. That's a fairly responsive thing to do. Anyone would do that in that kind of a situation. So going off of that, that's what had to happen. And now, I'll tell you this: if you want to see a good example of this, you can go back 4 years ago and you can hear them say that that fracking, oil drilling, things like that are bad and should be stopped. And now this time around, they're saying they're good, because the national prerogative has changed. There's no longer a luxury to be able to say that we can cut that down. It has to be ramped up, because to be able to keep things going, it has to be ramped up. So the rhetoric changes. That's how it works. Like, and that's how it works with everything. And that's just one example. But you could literally go to the other side that I didn't mention there. You could come up with the exact same thing for the other group, and then they would do the exact same thing. It's just how it works. I mean, there's certain things in the background that have to be done, even if you said that you would do the opposite. And supporting Ukraine and helping them to fight the Russians is something that is just inherently within American strategic interest. There's no reason why anyone would actually be against that. So while they will publicly say that they may not like it or they may want it to end, that wouldn't be the case. It just simply would not be. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And once again, you can take this whole entire conversation and you can flip it the other direction, and it'll work just fine that way. That's why look, y'all, that's why we're not hyped up into politics and stuff and drinking Kool-Aid and getting super political like other people here on YouTube do. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of my time, really. I mean, like, things are going to happen. Things are going to be done. And it doesn't matter what they say. Like, it really doesn't at all. And that's why I don't really care that much about who's going to get elected, because only very few things ever get changed from election to election. You've got this massive bureaucratic system made up of tens of millions of people. It's impossible to really do much of major change in that. That's why you'll see that when major change happens, it's really rare. And if it does happen, it's usually poorly done, because to get everyone on the same page, it takes years. Like, it takes longer than 2 terms to do it. And so by the time that one group is in and the other group is out, the plan is only half baked and half implemented, and so you don't really see a lot of change with that. So with that, I hope that does address
The general rule is, though, if you can wave some money underneath the sniffer of a politician, they will flip to whatever you're talking about. That's the general rule. Like, for example, if someone's like, I hate Ukraine, I hate it, and then all of a sudden they're like, wave some money in there, and they smell it, sniff, sniff. Actually, Ukraine's a great place. Ukraine's wonderful. Whoever says anything bad about Ukraine? That's the truth. Like, unfortunately, that's the way it works on both sides. Like, that's something universal across the entire board. Politicians lie, and they love money, even though they claim they're public servants. They love money, and if they can find a way to get money one way or another, they will switch their opinions based on who's giving them the most money, which is really messed up, but that's just the way it is. So I think ultimately that's what it'll come down to.
Oh, and I got another one here. I got another one, because right now, here's how the current rhetoric goes. All right, I'll tell you all how it goes. The current side that supports Ukraine, you know, at least like as far as like the game is played in the public, this is how it goes. So the current side that's supporting Ukraine is supporting them because they have compassion. They care for people. They love people. So we're going to give them bombs so that way they can blow up other people, because we care for their people. And so then the other side goes, oh, this group is nothing but warmongers. They want people to die. They want to eat our children. They want to throw all of America's babies into a meat grinder that'll have in giant black paint painted on the side, World War III or something like that. And everyone's going to die. It's going to be terrible. Everyone's going to get killed. We need to stop them. And so if the other side, and the side that is saying that they're terrible and we need to stop this war, if they get elected, you'll see them change their rhetoric almost overnight. It'll be like in a month. And then they'll start going, this war is so important. We must be strong. We must make sure that America represents itself as a strong country, and we need to show the Russians that we're not anyone to play with. And then the other side will go, these people are savage barbarians and war hawks that want nothing more than to watch people die overseas. They're going to get all of our little children and babies killed in a war. They're going to throw them in a meat grinder with World War III painted on the side. We have to get them out. We have to vote them out, and we have to stop them, or more little babies are going to get given rifles and thrown overseas to go fight in a war. And that's how
all
it
while
works.
they're sharing champagne and
Yes.
like nice steak dinners in the background behind closed doors, by the way.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. Like, that's just how it works. And that's why when people are like, no, he's lying, it's like, he has no reason to lie. That's actually probably the truth. Like, he's probably been lying the rest of the time. And then the other, you know, it's just how it works. Like, it's how it works. And that's why I don't take the thing personally, and that's why I don't really hate either of them. I dislike them because I find, like, just being honest with you all, I'm not going to tell you all what I don't like about either of them, but I find different points that both of them make to be really asinine, and I don't really think they make a lot of sense. But beyond that, both of them agreeing on this one topic, that's a good thing. I largely take that as being true. We have to, because that's the rule on this channel. But that is what it is. And so I hope that does address that fairly
Oh,
well.
you know what? Also, while we're on the topic of having state dinners for politicians, I don't know why. I think I was watching a documentary about like the U.S. state dinners or something like that today,
Bush
and I
throwing
came across
up!
I came across the video of George H.W. Bush throwing up on, I think, what was it, the Japanese prime minister's lap or something? Was that who that was?
Yes. Well, actually, I think it was the emperor.
Yeah, it was something like that. I've never seen that ever. I was a political science grad, so I would have thought I would have seen that at some point. I've never seen it. I was sitting there watching that today, thinking, "Damn, he passed out, like threw up on the emperor over there," and they had like everybody jumping tables and stuff, trying to like help him out. I had no idea this like happened like this. I think I'd heard about it somewhere.
Oh dang!
There it is. I
it.
hear it. Let's see it.
You want to see it? Yeah, y'all want to see it? Okay, so this is it, y'all. This is the thing. So there's Bush. I don't know who this is though. Like, let me check. So, oh, it's the Prime Minister of Japan. It's not the Emperor. Okay, so it is the Prime Minister of Japan. So here's the clip. All right, he's sick. He's falling out.
Oh, jeez. Oh my God.
Oh, and the Prime Minister, he's just shocked. He's just sitting there. He doesn't even know how to process this. And so I'm
not gonna lie. I got to give it to the Emperor right there, because if somebody did that to me, I would be like I would be losing it, like all over the place, doing the same thing that the president did. I can't handle somebody like throwing up that close like that. He just sat there the whole time, just like a trooper, like, okay, whatever.
Dude, I think he was in shock because his pants were covered in vomit. Like, I think that's really what it was. But to let y'all know a little bit of context behind this, Bush had the flu like horrendously when he went on the state visit. The problem was though is that the state visit couldn't wait because there was while Japan and America had been allies ever since World War II, in the early 90s there was for some reason some tensions that started to rise in between the United States and Japan, at least diplomatically. And so this state visit was supposed to kind of like smooth over those tensions and ensure that the relationship in between Japan and the United States would remain firm, and also to make sure to go over there and just represent the United States. It's really hard to cancel these kind of things once they're slated into the schedule. So he went over there, although he was really sick with the flu. And then he was so sick, he actually ended up just passing out and vomiting, like we saw in the clip, right onto the lap of the Prime Minister of Japan. So not like a good moment, but this is how it went. And so you can see everyone crowding around. This lady pulls out a napkin and starts wiping his mouth.
Or just one guy comes running up in front. He'll like wave the cameras down and be like, "Put the cameras down." No, watch. He'll turn around in a second. He doesn't know what to do.
And the orchestra is still
music
playing.
Really setting the mood. Look, watch, here he goes. Come on now, put the cameras down.
Oh, no, I think he was telling them to sit down. He was like, "Come on, folks, sit down. This isn't anything worth looking at." Yeah, that's what he did, because look, everyone started sitting down. He was like, "Come on, folks, sit down. Like, let's all sit down." And so they all started sitting down.
It's just again. A nice summer day. Just look at that music.
Oh man,
climbing all through the food like that.
And he was out. I mean, like, he had it bad.
Man, I can feel for him. I've been like that with that like little bug one time before. That stuff will put you down and out.
Yeah, I mean, jeez, that was a tough one right there. Yeah. Ugh.
I've just never seen it. I think they've like hidden this video or something. This is the only one I was able to find on YouTube before, like when I saw it earlier today. I don't know why this video is like being buried, because it's like really historical. I wish I could have seen this like sometime before. And also I saw someone say, "Oh, well, he dodged some shoes." No, this is Daddy Bush right here. Yeah. That was the kid Bush that got hit with the shoes, or almost hit with the shoes. He actually ducked both of them. He missed. And also the Secret Service was like historically late as usual when it comes to responding to threats, but they eventually showed up like a day later.
Man, there's always a goof that everyone does. Like, remember Gerald R. Ford falling down the stairs of Air Force One?
I remember a few people falling up and downstairs on Air Force One.
Man, let's see. Let me think of a couple of other goofs. Let's see. There was that time. Oh, wait a minute. I think this wasn't really a goof. This just came out in the presidential library later. But Lyndon B. Johnson talking about "it cuts me, it cuts me." You know that one, Matthew?
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
I've heard that one.
And then let's see, Nixon on the phone with someone about Vietnam, and like they shared the story, like it was a war crime that they were sharing the story of, but they were both like laughing over it and stuff. Oh man, there's like terrible ones for each of them. But yeah, it's always funny to look like that one's probably one of the funnier ones because of how the Prime Minister of Japan reacted to that. He was just like, "Oh my god!" He was like, "I can't move. I'm gonna throw up if I move." He's like, "Oh, you know, that's really what he was saying in his head." But you know, yeah, that was a crazy one.
I'm sure
right
he wanted
there.
to run off, probably.
Dude, you bet, man. He was wanting to sprint, honestly. Let's see. What about the Bull Moose story? That wasn't really a mess up. That was actually a pretty cool moment when Teddy got shot. Because he got shot in his glass cases and a really thick pamphlet of the speech. And so it ended up stopping the bullet to where it only punctured his skin a little bit in between his ribs. It stopped it from going into his lungs. So he continued to actually deliver the speech, which was a pretty cool deal. Like, that was actually pretty crazy. But sadly, it didn't win him the election somehow. Like, I was like, how in the hell does that not win someone the election? He just gets shot, comes back up. He's like, I'm shot, but ain't nothing stopping the speech. It's like, you got to respect someone like that. Apparently not the case back then. But anyways, see, I've seen some people. FDR was a stud. FDR was a player. Like, he really was. Like, a lot of people don't know that. He died and they had to get the mistress away before they called his wife. Like, did you know that, Matthew?
Nah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he was down in Georgia. This is in 1945, by the way, so this is like late World War II. But he's down in Georgia, I forgot what town, but he's down there and he's getting a portrait made of him. And he says, I have a terrific headache. So they cart him off, like, because, you know, he's wheelchair bound. And so they cart him off. They go sit him off on a balcony away from the painter who was making the portrait. And he literally just dies out there. Like, he just literally just dropped dead on the spot, probably from a stroke or a heart attack or something like that. Maybe, who knows? But the Secret Service guy came in. He was like, Mr. President, you want to get back to making the portrait? And he was like, oh, he's dead. And so then they're like, oh, shit.
Oh.
And then they went running into the other room where the mistress was that he was just playing around with earlier that day. And they were like, hey, look, he's dead. You got to go. We're about to have to call Eleanor Roosevelt and tell him that FDR is dead. And so then she left. And I think like 20 minutes after she left, they then called up Eleanor Roosevelt and told her, yeah, FDR just died out here, you know, suddenly. It was like unexpected.
Jeez, I didn't know that. Like, that's a piece they left out of the poli-sci courses, I think.
Yeah, I think it was, but that was a crazier story. Let me think of another crazy one. JFK was like that too. Everyone knows that, though. That's nothing new. And let me see. Let me think of. Oh yeah, Eisenhower. So you know something interesting, y'all? You know how everyone found out that the whole food pyramid thing in America was like a complete scam and like a lie and everything? I'll tell y'all why. It actually has to do with Matthew's favorite president, Eisenhower, or Ike. So Eisenhower, as you may know, Matthew, had a heart attack in the middle of his presidency, which was kind of a scare because it was a pretty, you know, serious heart attack. Did you know that?
No, I actually did not know that either.
So he had a heart attack golfing. I think it was out towards Iowa or somewhere like that, kind of where he was from. And so they brought him to a hospital, and they were like, "Oh, what's killing him? Like, what's giving him the heart attack?" And so at the time, they knew that he had the heart attack because he was a heavy smoker. Like, the guy was almost like Churchill. He was chuffing like a train. And so they were like, man, we can either come out with this damning report about how cigarettes and cigars are nearly killing the president, or we can come out and say that he has a fat-rich diet of meat, and that's what's clogging up his arteries and giving him a heart attack. And so they decided to go with the choice of saying that it was actually his meat-heavy diet that was causing him the heart attack instead of his heavy smoking habit, which, from what we know, actually was causing the heart attack because the actual doctor's reports came out and they were down in between the two, and because of some internal, like, kind of like political debate, they decided to go with the heavy meats because the big tobacco companies at the time had a pretty big lobby in the government at that specific moment in history. So they went with the heavy meat diet thing. So that's what created the U.S. food pyramid, is that I think it's the Department of Health and several other departments came together and came up with what they said was going to be a nutritious diet, and that largely consisted of a heavy grain diet, which is what really promoted a lot of the obesity here in the United States, because grains and gluten are really one of the contributing factors to obesity. So that's actually why the food pyramid was incorrect that badly for so long, is because it largely had to do with Eisenhower's heart attack and kind of wanting to smooth over the whole deal of it actually being caused by heavy smoking. But
that's very interesting. Also, by the way, I've got another interesting fact for you as well. Go check your Discord DM and show the picture that's currently there, and let me know what's on the screen, because I don't think I'll be able to see it.
All right, so we got a picture of Bill Clinton
Yes, and it's not political, by the way. Like, I'm not making a political statement. It's just a picture of a guy who was the president, by the way. But can you see it on the screen?
Yes.
So interestingly enough, this is a very historic photo because there was a long time mystery because they actually said that Bill Clinton was in the photo, obviously right here at the desk, but there's actually two people in the photograph. Did you know that?
Oh, get the hell out of here. It's Monica Lewinsky.
There's two people in the photo. Yes.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
There was two people here, believe it or not. It was a long time mystery. They're like, where's the second person? And then later they found out.
Man, get the hell out of here. Like, man, I'm not believing that because there's a photographer right back there in clear view shot of what's under the desk, man. They would be like, hey, who's that down there? And why are your pants down? Like, they would have had, like, questions, man. But beyond
Oh, no, they were just under the desk. Like, they had a hammock under there.
a hammock?
What do you think they were doing?
Dude. Come on, man. You know what you're talking about. But getting back though to the Eisenhower story, because it is a really interesting story. That's kind of what was wrong with the U.S. National diet, if you want to say. Like, if it was ever going off the food pyramid, it was heavily skewed. And now modern nutritionists are actually going back, wildly enough, to the Victorian era, which usually was like considered almost like it's like the end of the dark age of medicine, honestly, but a lot of people are actually going back to the Victorian era nutritional diets, which say have a little bit of everything. So instead of it being heavily laden in meat or grain or one specific thing, it's really try and proportion it out to where you have the same amount of everything. So have some fruits, have some vegetables, have some meats, have some grains, have a little bit of everything instead of being heavily laden in one specific food group. So kind of interesting with that, how the nutritional thing is sort of shifting these days. And then, you have like the nuts out there who talk about eat bull balls and stuff like that only, and with milk for some reason. Like, I don't know what that is.
Raw liver.
Yeah,
or a side of steroids.
Or you have people who say eating only kale is good for you. Like, I feel like both of those are really bad ideas, like eating only bull balls with milk or kale exclusively. Like, both of those are horrific for you. I really do believe in the Victorian like nutritional diet schedule, which is a little bit of everything. Like, why limit yourself? Try and eat everything if you want to. It's got to be good for you. Like, people have lived for thousands of years with fairly decent, well, depending on where you were, fairly decent health, eating a standard diet of just a little bit of everything instead of one specific thing and a whole load of it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one after that incredibly long rabbit hole.
All right, so moving on to our next one here, we have a very generous $100 donation from Patrol, and thank you very much, Patrol, for that very generous support. And also, I don't even know where the hell your super chat went. It like disappeared from the spreadsheet over here on the left side. That is weird as hell. It's back again. It just popped up. I don't know what's going on with that. But Patrol said LSA represent and put in that 100. And also, he said separate in the live chat. He said, thank y'all for being neutral as possible. And we try, Patrol. Like, seriously, like even tonight with the statements, I saw some people get very upset by the fact that we commented on both sides supporting Ukraine. I don't know why that is. And I'll be perfectly honest. I don't understand why people like hate one political candidate or another. I obviously have my own preferences, as so does many people in the live chat. But I don't hate any of the presidential candidates. I've never like gotten that to that level of like personalness to it. Like, I just look at them for their policy points and that's it. I don't start hating the person because ultimately they are just people. So you can't just hate them for their ideas. That would be a little bit ridiculous in my opinion. If you want to hate them, go right ahead, but I don't understand it. So, but thank you very much for that, by the way. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for saying the LSA is representing Patrol and supporting it and helping to keep on running. And also on top of that, saying thank you for keeping it neutral. We try our best. I largely am the same as Matthew. I'll be honest with y'all. Matthew's got his preference. I got my preference. My preference, honestly, is none of them right now, really, to be honest with y'all. I mean, like, I feel like that's a pretty down the middle kind of an approach. Like, I'm not really for any of them. But one thing I will say, though, is that I don't hate candidates, and I don't really dislike candidates as people. Like, when I say I dislike both of them, I'm talking about some of the things that they've said, not them as people. Me personally, I actually think both of the current candidates are probably pretty relatable, pretty funny people. If you were around them, you'd probably enjoy their company, whether you liked them or not. If you were around them for an hour or two, you'd probably be like, that's not a bad person. You know, they probably have good jokes, or they're just entertaining to be around. You know, you usually don't climb to those kinds of heights without having at least some sort of personable charisma about you. So I would say they're probably interesting folks, for sure. You know, but still at the same time, some of their policies, some people like, some people don't like, but the reality is that most of those probably won't be implemented from either side. And if they are, the impact will most likely be negligible. That's usually how I look at it, so I don't really get that hyped up about the stuff. And on top of that, why in the world am I going to start trying to profess and preach to y'all some sort of political dogma? Y'all all have your own opinions on who you like, who you don't like, what your standpoints are, and who you're going to vote for. Who am I to act like I have a pedestal, a soapbox, to preach to y'all about why y'all are wrong or why y'all are right and why y'all should or shouldn't do what y'all are already going to be doing? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I'm on top of that a person just like y'all. Like yeah, I'm running this channel along with Matthew, and we have 275,000 subscribers, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything. I'm literally a person with the same kind of opinions or takes y'all would have. So who am I to be telling y'all anything? That doesn't make any sense. Y'all should make up y'all's own minds, completely devoid of any kind of external influence, and then vote for who you want. I mean, maybe one of them actually is doing something that benefits you specifically. And I would also tell y'all, don't vote by party tickets. Like, don't go, oh, it's, you know, red or blue all the way. That is really goofy. Like, actually look at the policies that are being brought forward, because some of them may benefit you and some of them may not. Like, in all honesty, and it may not even be the party you're voting for that's benefiting you or not. You never know. You have to actually look at their policy points and see. And also, another thing I gotta tell y'all, don't look at the federal level. So many people get lost with that. Like, the federal level almost doesn't even matter. You need to really look at the state level, because the state level is where a lot of the actual decisions are made. And a lot of people don't realize that. So really pay a lot of attention to who you're voting for in your state legislators and your governor, because your governor and your state legislators end up actually making a lot of the policies and laws, the statute, that y'all have to live by on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who actually decide things on the by and large that are the major federal issues that never change. Like, you know, like if you want to be honest here, you know, all of y'all know about guns and certain kinds of other things. And if y'all ever look at the federal level discussions, they're always talking about what the states are doing, because the states are the ones who largely kind of dictate the ebb and flow. It doesn't really matter what the other states are doing, because your state is what you want to do. So, you know, that's kind of another big kind of tip I have to tell y'all. Don't really focus on the federal level too much. You ought to be focusing more so on your state level, because that's really where a lot of the magic happens, at least in terms of the laws to get passed and the ones that you like and you don't like. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, but thank you once again for support and enjoying us keeping it neutral. I hope that was kind of a neutral bit of advice, though, to everyone, you know, in case y'all actually wanted to make your votes count. I hope that y'all listen to that, because it is entirely true. Like, that's not, like, really an opinion. That's honestly truth if you ever look at the stats and where statutes are passed and different things. Like, you know, for example, this is one that I know we can bring up a little bit, because, you know, everyone's got their opinion on this, but I don't feel like anyone's, like, really vehement about this anymore. Weed is legal or illegal in different states. Like, you know, on the federal level, there's always this conversation going on about, we need to make weed legal, or we need to make it illegal across the board. Many of y'all will see that that's been going on for decades now. It's been going on ever since I was alive. And it's never been implemented either way. It's never been completely legalized on the federal level or criminalized. Well, it's still criminalized on the federal level, but the enforcement of that's kind of iffy these days. But still, it's never been completely legalized. But on the state level, though, you can see states either go hardcore on criminalizing possession or decriminalizing it completely, and in fact, allowing the open sell and distribution of it. That's a thing that changes from state to state, and it's like that on every policy issue. So it's a lot better to vote on a state level, because if you don't like it, like, you know, to go through your options here, if you don't like it, you can actually vote for your state legislators that also don't like it, and they're going to be the ones whose votes in any kind of a legislator actually count, because it's the one that moves the freest, to the state legislators instead of the federal one. Or if you like it, you can vote for a state legislator that likes it, and wants to pass it, and it probably will have a higher chance of changing because it's the state level and not the federal level. So I hope that kind of lays it out there, at least on that one example. Of course, I'm not going to tell y'all what my opinion is on that, just to give y'all an example, but I hope that y'all pay a lot more attention to the state level because it is important. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Scott, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Scott, as well, for that support. He said, it looks like the Gaza war will be completed within 3 months. And how long do you think the war against Hezbollah in Lebanon will take?
Oh, the war with Hezbollah in Lebanon could take years, possibly, because usually these kinds of asymmetrical wars are really low intensity, and they require a decent amount of resources and expense, but they don't really get solved quickly. It could go on for quite a while if the Israelis are seeking to completely eliminate Hezbollah. This could go on for years, to be entirely honest. This could be the beginning of such a thing. And also, it does look like the Gaza war is going to be completed soon because Hamas did very poorly at surviving the whole Israeli onslaught thing. And I was very interested in that because usually they end up holding out somewhat well, at least historically, for a while. This time they got floored, like in less than a year. And so I would have to agree, it does look like that conflict is going to come rounding out very soon. But the one in Lebanon, considering the size and scale of the country compared to the Gaza Strip, could take years, possibly. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can, in my opinion. And I thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Scott, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also real quick, I saw one more comment in the live chat. I couldn't let it go. David Tablet said, imagine how this country as a whole would be if you could eliminate the political polarization in it. It's true, David. Like, honestly, this is the fault of the politicians and the people as well, because the politicians always say stuff to, like, turn each other into enemies. That's the way the two-party system works. So it's always happened throughout the entire history of elections. But the difference is now, it's like the politicians have thought, well, we're really going to take it to a whole new dirty level. We're going to start taking it even deeper to make sure that we can win the election. And when no sides really have any, like, restraint on that, it starts getting worse. And then the people are already angry because there are some problems out there that people are suffering with, like the inflation and stuff like that. And they're already angry, so they hear something that basically puts like the spark in the gas-filled room, and all of a sudden people start going rampant, hating each other and going berserk. And that really is a shame. That really should be tamped down. There's really no way to control that except for people simply deciding to be decent and having boundaries. But I don't know if that's ever going to return back like that. But it would be nice if some civility would return to it. Because ultimately, if you don't like a politician, there's no need to start hating the person or like you want to do harm to that person. All you have to do is simply vote them out and tell other people we should vote the person out. That's as simple as it gets. And ultimately, if they get back in, well, it's the will of the people. That's the way the thing works. And if we ultimately suffer from it, that's the like benefit or downside to democracy. That's just the way it works. There's a good side to it and a bad side. So I just don't know if it's ever going to calm back down or not. But it really is a shame to see people like hating each other so bad over simply their ideas like that. It's really a shame. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, we have one from LSA Sergeant Figman, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Sarge, for that support. He said, IDF will start with airstrikes and MLRS, and then blitz with tanks and Namirs. And also, the 35th will probably go behind lines and run support and air assault missions supported by Apaches, and armored infantry units will be the bulk force.
And I thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figman, and that is exactly how it will go. It always begins with an airstrike and heavy artillery bombardments, and then they move in with APCs. Largely, for the most part, the tanks are close, but they hold back a little bit because the idea, well, at least the doctrinal idea here in America and most countries, is that the mechanized forces are supposed to fix the enemy in place, and then the armor is supposed to come in and destroy them once they're kind of stuck in position. So that way the armor isn't having to do that much maneuvering. It just kind of comes up like a giant sledgehammer and crushes them. But let's see, the 35th will be behind the lines. I forgot to mention that earlier, but groups like airborne units such as that do get dropped behind the enemy lines, and they're usually conducting missions like sabotage, trying to go after enemy commanders, strike at enemy artillery units, gather any vital intelligence that could be relayed back to their command, anything like that. Their airborne units and other special forces units conduct operations like that, and that is very cool to know that your unit will be involved in that kind of stuff. And also, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, LSA Sergeant Figment. You are actually a veteran of the IDF, crazily enough, and it's really cool to have you here and to have you also explain how that will go. And that is a very good and accurate picture of what it will be looking like. And we'll probably see that here in the next few hours or so when we get more footage of what's happening. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rad Doctor once again, who puts in his second support of the night. And huge shout out to Rad Doctor for that $20 support. And they also said, did you hear that Turkey is going to allow the U.S. access to their S-400 to be allowed back into the F-35 program, a long-lasting access?
I actually did not hear that, Rad Doctor. I'll be interested to see what America's response to that will be. I'll have to start looking into that and seeing if we've even given them a response to that. But that is very interesting to hear that they're trying to re-enter the F-35 program. I'm having a feeling, though, that because of all of their actions recently, their trust has been eroded so heavily they probably will never be brought back into the F-35 program, but that is still an interesting move by Turkey to try and ensure that they will get some F-35s at a minimum. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and I will have to look into that a bit further. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also Gunfox61 said, don't trust Turkey. Oh, trust me, I wasn't ever going to trust Turkey. Like, Turkey, very untrustworthy. The most untrustworthy country in the Middle East right now, because they have an agenda. They're trying to build a sphere of influence, and they're getting that at pretty much any cost, even at the expense of, like, undermining their NATO alliance even, which is insane. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, we have a $20 donation from Davo LBC. And thank you very much, Davo, for that support once again. And he says, LSA Private Davo LBC reporting, and my question is, why do cats make good warriors? And the answer is because they've got 9 lives.
Oh, that's a good one. That's actually a good one. I got to think
the Russians don't have 9 lives. They're not cats.
Man,
they're rats.
No cat. but beyond that, man, I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. LSA Private Devo, LBC. And thank you so much once again for throwing in a pretty good joke. That was a pretty good one. I like it. It was a dad joke of a sort, but it was good, and I'd appreciate that. And I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Barry Woodward, who puts in a $20 donation as well. And thank you very much, Barry, for that $20 support. Hey! He says, Enforcer Matt Enforcer and the LSA, how do I convey to my got my back forces that it's worth fighting to protect the U.S. Constitution? He said, Slava US of A, as it is from 1776.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Barry Woodward. And as far as arguing people in America, it's important to preserve the Constitution, I suppose. The best way that I can think of arguing that is that it's the only reason this nation has survived. Like, that's the only reason. I get so aggravated at people in the modern day who are like, the Constitution is just bad. Like, it's just wrong and it needs to be, like, ripped up and rewritten. It's like, that is so stupid. Like, also, I'll say this. This might be a hot take. I actually think the Electoral College is a good thing. Like, a lot of people hate it when it's not for them and like it when it's for them. I just generally think it's a good thing across the board, and I'm a big fan of keeping it, because, you know, it's I believe, if I'm correct, man, the Electoral College is built into the U.S. Constitution, if I'm correct.
I honestly, I'm not even going to pretend to know that one. I'm not really sure. I think it may be, but I'm not quite sure.
I'll have to look into that a little bit more. I believe it is, in some way or form. And also Bobo said yes, so it is in the Constitution. And it is a very important institution, the Electoral College. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Electoral College ensures that the country largely elects the president, or really really just the president specifically for that matter, based on the state's representation, not the populations, because popular votes are an issue. Like, a lot of people like popular votes, but wherever a country exists where people just win by popular votes, they hate it. Let me give you all an example. Singapore. Literally, that's just it. Singapore only exists because the Malaysian governmental system operated off of a popular vote. And because there were so many people living in Singapore, Singapore literally made the decisions for everyone in Malaysia. And Malaysia hated that so much, they all unanimously came together, excluded Singapore's vote, and voted to kick them out. And that's how Singapore ended up becoming an independent nation, or a microstate for the large part. But that's kind of the problem with popular votes, is that a few key population centers end up dictating the will of the nation for everyone in the country, whether they like that or not. The Electoral College ensures, a lot like the bicameral legislator that we have, that there is representation for the entire nation. So if you have a lot of people in New York City that are voting one way, that can be offset by the Electoral College, because the Electoral College goes off the idea of every single state, a lot like the House of Representatives, is given a specific amount of electors based off of the population that represents that area of the country. And then those electors go forward representing the entire population of that state, regardless of whether a lot of them voted or not, and then they cast their votes for the president. It's a very smart system to do it like that, because while people say it's not really representing all of the people who voted, it is representing the hypothesized will of the nation. Now, that's kind of another interesting thing. The Electoral College incentivizes you to actually vote to change the electors for your state. And that's kind of a big thing, because with Alabama, I believe, Maddie, how many electors does Alabama have? Let me go pull that up. How many electors?
You know, I'll be honest with you. Like, I remember like trying to grasp the entire electoral college system in college. Nobody seems to fully understand how that works. Like, everybody generally understands the basics about it. Like, it's not too hard to understand the basics, but the really deep details about it are kind of like confusing to even political science experts. It's just kind of like it's just really hard to explain the whole system. You're doing a pretty good job of explaining it compared to the explanations I've heard.
Oh, okay, so I actually got it. So apparently, it's the representatives plus the senators. Every state gets 2 senators, so it's the amount of representatives plus 2. So Alabama gets 9 electoral votes. So if you're in the state of Alabama, and I'm just going to uncensor the names of political parties to make this a little bit easier to understand. So you have your option for Republicans or Democrats. So here in the state of Alabama, you have that option. And depending on how the popular vote goes in the state of Alabama, those all of the electoral votes for the state of Alabama end up going to the Republicans or the Democrats. So if you have, say, out of the 5.5 million people who live in Alabama, only 1 million of them vote, and 600,000 of them vote Republican, and 400,000 of them vote Democrat, all 9 electoral votes end up going towards the Republicans. But if you were to actually get out in your state and vote, this is kind of the big part about actually encouraging states to represent themselves in the system. If a lot of people get out and vote and they vote Democrat, then you can actually just switch all of your electors in that state, all 9 of them, to being Democrat instead. So instead of it being the popular vote and kind of like a mob free-for-all, you actually get to make sure to tailor the answer of each state based on the popular vote in that state specifically, and then that state has electors, which are pretty much the representatives of the will of that entire state and their population, and then they go cast their votes for the president.
But you know, one complication to that is, I think it's in some states, some of the electors are unbound. Like, they're not bound to like follow necessarily the votes of the people. They can pretty much go any which way they want. That's only like in some instances in some states. I'm not really sure which ones it is, but that's kind of like a part of it that's like I don't know about that. Like, they should be really bound to vote for whoever the person was in the state that was being voted for. But sometimes it doesn't work like that. It's just weird. Like, there are loopholes in the system, just like pretty much every system. But, you know, it's just, in my opinion, I don't want to get political here, by the way. I'm trying to, like, skirt around it. The Electoral College system has its benefits, certainly, but also there are parts of it that could invite corruption at the same time. But like I said, that pretty much is inherent in pretty much any electoral system. There is some level of corruption in all of them. So I don't know. That's as far as I can go without getting into too much politics.
I would actually say it. I haven't really heard of any stories of electors voting against their state's wishes. At least from what I know recently, I don't think any of them have. I don't really think any of them have ever historically, actually. So it doesn't really matter whether they're bound or not by the state law. I just think they vote however their state voted for the large part. I haven't heard anything different about that. But some people are saying, why in the world are all of the electors going one way or the other just based on the popular vote? Well, that's because however the state votes, like whoever gets the majority in the state, it's expected that that is the will of that state. So while it may be 60-40, like I just brought up in my last example in Alabama, out of the million voters that would have voted in that hypothetical, it is expected that considering that 60% of the popular vote in Alabama went towards the Republican candidate, that is the will of the state of Alabama. And while there's a 40% of people who didn't want that to be their will, the majority is the will. So, you know, like that's the same example for California. Like California is going to vote Democrat. That's how they've always done it for decades now. So they'll vote Democrat, and there's a lot of people in California who aren't Democrats. But considering that the Democrats in the popular vote in California will outnumber the Republicans, it is the will of the state of California that they wish to vote for the the Democratic candidate for president. So that's just kind of how it works, because democracy isn't supposed to be like, okay, you know, the majority voted for this, so we're going to get this, but also everyone who didn't vote for that gets an alternative option simultaneously. Whoever represents the majority will gets what they want. That's how popular votes always work. And with the Electoral College, instead of having a national popular vote, you have multiple state popular votes, and then those state popular votes are all proportioned to be worth the exact population of that state, including their representatives and also their 2 senators, and then they go cast their votes in for the president representing that state. Some states do have it a little different, though. I think Maine actually splits their electors. So depending on what percentage of the popular vote in Maine goes towards one party or the other, they actually split their electors to where some of them will go vote for one and some of them will go vote for the other. But I honestly say it's a fairly good system because it makes sure that while some states may have lower voter turnout and some may have higher voter turnout, the entire population of the United States is properly and accurately represented in the vote, whether people voted or not. But that should be a pretty good argument for everyone to go out and vote, because if you want your state to go one way or the other, you actually have more of a say in that than you would think. Because if enough people end up voting for one side or the other, you can tip your party from what it currently is to the other side, and then all of those electors end up going and voting for the candidate that you want. So I actually think it highly incentivizes voting more so than a popular vote based system. I think that actually de-incentivizes voting for the most part, because you just have kind of like a mob at that point versus mob, and it's not really a bit of a game of strategy almost, with making sure that your state and its entire population are represented in a collective system. But with that, I hope that does address it. Well, once again, we're not getting into politics here. I'm just making sure to explain how our election system works in a sense, and I actually think it's a fairly decent one. But beyond that, I would say that that's a pretty good thing worth arguing for. That was a massive rabbit hole to get around to that. But the Constitution is worth arguing for because it's how this nation has existed. Not to just argue for tradition, but it's an amazing way this nation has existed. Sure, it's corrupt in some ways. Sure, it's not the best and perfect in others, but this is the best. This is the best republic that has ever existed, the best nation that's ever existed on the face of this earth, with the kind of abilities that it gives its citizenry, the kind of say that the citizenry have had, and the kind of benefits and prosperity that this republic has been able to endure for so many centuries has been brought about by the founding documents of the Constitution of the United States made in 1787. That's why I would say it's a very important kind of a document to protect. It's a very important one to enforce, because it's the only thing that has given this country shape, form, and purpose for over 2 centuries. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, getting outside of that massive rabbit hole right there about the electoral system. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next. Also, Gagarin Pugh said, don't Republicans in California or Democrats in Texas deserve a proportional part of their state's electoral votes? I don't really think so, to be entirely honest, because with the electoral system, whoever wins the popular vote in that state, it simply works off of kind of like a popular vote for the nation, but it's broken down on a state level. So if a majority Democrat population wins in California, it's the will of the state. Like, that's it. Like, they want a Democrat. If the Republicans win in Texas, they want a Republican. That's just the way it is. I don't really believe in doing it another way, because I feel like it kind of gives a cop out where it's like you can have the cake and eat it. And while I'm all for that, like in every single aspect, in politics and kind of in elections, I feel like it actually is a little bit more conducive just to do the popular votes on the state level, and whoever wins that gets all of the electors. If you want that to change, though, if you don't like that, you actually can vote for representatives in your state legislature that would actually change your state constitution to where you can split electors, because that's not laid out by the Constitution how electors are actually proportioned. That's actually something that's laid out in the state constitution. So it's different on each state. Like Alabama says, all electors go one way. Whoever wins the majority vote, they all go towards that party. But Maine has it to where if like one candidate gets 60%, if I'm remembering this correctly, if they get like 60% of the majority vote, they get like 2 electors, and the other person gets 1. Or it could go the other way around. So you actually can change that in your state constitution, but that's largely something that's up to the state legislators. So once again, while I think that's a great thing to have it like all for one and all electors go one way instead of, kind of splitting them up on how the popular vote went, you could, if you don't like that, have that changed in your state, so that way they are split up. But I personally like that kind of system, but maybe you don't, and maybe that's something you would like to change in your own home state. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Nova Stardust, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Nova Stardust, for that support. They said, I'm happy y'all finally got a vacation. And I'm just back from a trip to Canada. And our last stop was the most southern point of Canada, Point Pelé. A very beautiful place. And take one from the chat, if not too late.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Nova Stardust. And of course, it's not too late. And let's see, the most southerly place in Canada would be, Point Pelé, right here. I knew it was right there. I knew it. So let's take a look at this. Oh, it's marshy. It's got beaches. Dude, this actually kind of looks like Florida a little bit.
Yeah, I like this. It's like a good screensaver or something.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I wish we could go here one day. Maybe we will. But that is incredibly cool, actually. I gotta say, I'm really quite impressed with that. And I gotta say, thank you for the support. I hope that you enjoyed that little vacation, because we also had a fun one as well. We actually took the Coast Starlight from LA all the way up to Seattle. That was pretty much the whole point of the trip. It was incredibly fun. I really enjoyed it. Matthew has a bit of a different story. He didn't really like it that much, but I really enjoyed it. The scenery was great. The food was great. I liked sleeping on the train. I thought it was really neat. So one day I hope to ride another train, but who knows when that will be. That might be way in the future. But still, a huge thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, we will make sure to get one from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one from the chat is going to go to, let's see here. It's going to go to Certain Def, who says, what times in history would you two wish to live, respectively? And honestly, that's an interesting question right there. Honestly, if we could live in any time in history, I would like to go back to like the 1950s just to see what that's like. I'm not sure if I'd actually want to live it or not, but I would be very interested to see how that really was. Like during the height of like, what period was that, Enforcer? Around 1950? Was that the Industrial Revolution, or was that a different time?
That would have been like the last decades of the Industrial Revolution for the large part.
Yeah, that seemed like an interesting time to live, like right on the cusp of everything sort of taking off to an extent, in my opinion. So I'd probably choose that time. But Enforcer, what say you?
Let's see. That's a good question. If I could live in any time in history, which one would it be? I think I would probably live sometime in the 1910s. Sure, you got World War I and everything to deal with, but if you can survive that, which if you're an American, it would be pretty easy to survive that, the odds are in your favor. Now, Spanish flu, on the other hand, your odds are not in your favor. But if you can survive World War I and Spanish flu, the 1920s were pretty good. The 1930s were rough, but they weren't that bad. Like, the Great Depression is like, everyone always goes, oh, the Great Depression. But it wasn't actually horrendous. It was rough. Now, it was very rough. It was rougher than it ever got financially in America, but it wasn't an incredibly bad time. And then you get to live through the 1940s as well, which is, of course, World War II for the most part, but still a pretty okay time in American history, at least on the home front. And also you get to travel the world and see new places and maybe blow them up. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I wouldn't want to be blowing up new places. I personally like them the way they are. But, you know, in case you were into that, you could do that as well. So I would say like the 1910s, and then you get to live on up through the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then you probably die in the 1960s or the 70s or so, if you're my age. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, Nova Stardust, we wouldn't have been able to get such an interesting question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one right here goes to Mike Avenoso, who puts in a $10 donation. And he says, a coward is far more likely to start a quarrel than a man of courage. Thomas Jefferson. So the question is, because you think we should allow long-range missile use, if World War III starts, are you going to fight? Oh, well, Mike, that's not really a question, because we are of draft age. So if World War III started, we wouldn't have a choice. We'd probably get drafted. So we'd be going anyway. So when for example, when I say that long-range missiles should be used inside of Russia, I'm fully aware that that could cause World War III to start, and we might have to fight in it. My motto is this, though. Are we going to live in a world that is going sideways, where everybody's scared to stand up to a bully, and we're going to let them run rampant at the cost of pretty much everything, our morals and pretty much everything? Or are we going to stand up and potentially take a risk and say something about it? I take the latter. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. I don't really get to plead. Much like Matthew, I'm also registered in the Selective Service here in the United States, meaning that if the draft comes around, I will be drafted. And if that's the case, that is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and change my morals because I'm a coward. I would be scared, obviously, to be drafted. I would be scared to go fight in a war. I think everyone's naturally scared to fight in a war. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and let the values and the standards of this nation erode away because I'm scared of fighting and possibly scared of dying for what I believe in. My beliefs are very firm. If I have to fight and die for them, that is what it is. I want, like, will I be going into battle charging with a bayonet leveled at the enemy, like across no man's land? Obviously not. I would be scared. I'd probably be pissing my pants. But I'm still not going to sit there and let that stop me from supporting and backing up what I believe in. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next ones go to Nicholas Arredondo, who put in a 10. Also, Merry Christmas, the shitter's full. They put in a 10 as well. And Michael Murphyhill put in a 10 also. Huge shout out to Merry Christmas, Nicholas, and Michael for that $10 support each. And we appreciate that very much, of course. There's no comments addressed or attached to it, but we do appreciate that very generous support. It helps keep the channel running. And we also have a $10 support from Andrew Shank. And he says, no one likes Hamas. Oh, there are some people that do, and they're crazy. But yeah. He said, but Israel is committing war crimes. And he said, that's why we hate Russia. And if Israel wants to be a part of the West, then abide with Geneva Conventions. And I agree, they have the right to defense. But here's the thing, Andrew, that I have to disagree with on that. Israel has, honestly, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, they have done things that could be classified as war crimes, but they're facing a very, very tough situation because they're fighting in very densely packed areas with large populations in small little spots. So when they decide to go hit the terrorists, which are hiding literally in the same buildings that the civilians are in, they're faced with a dilemma. The terrorists are attacking Israel, so they have to defend themselves. Israel has to launch attacks. But how do you get the civilians out of the way when the civilians are being used as human shields? And the truth is, you really can't. So Israel tries to do precision strikes when they can, but unfortunately, it's just part of the sad situation over there. There will be civilian casualties, and there's no way around that. They try to minimize it, but there's really no way to totally eliminate that. So I don't think there's any way to fix it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I would agree with everything that Matty said to a T. Actually, he described it the exact way I would. But, you know, that's something that I also have to say, you know, on top of this, is that just because, well, Hamas is actually liked. Like, I don't know if people know that. I think the hot dog man is actually one of the people out there who, like, openly say, oh, from the river to the sea, Palestine needs to be free, and then like heavily encourages Hamas and Hezbollah to do what they do. Like, he's one of those. I think he is one of those people. If I'm remembering the rhetoric correctly that he puts out, people actually do like them, and that's the problem. And when people talk about getting rid of Israel, they're talking about putting these people in charge. Like, they're not talking about, oh, let's create some nice government, like this really really cool like chill government. No, they're talking about put Hamas in charge of what is Israel and call it Palestine. That's not a smart idea. And on top of that, at the end of the day, regardless of whether both sides are committing war crimes or not, at that point, they're both doing the same thing, right? If they're both committing war crimes, they're both doing kind of heinous things. But then we have to boil it down to this simple equation. Who is with us and who is against us? If they're both committing war crimes, we can't really factor that in as, oh, one's worse than the other. They're both doing it. So considering that Israel is Western aligned and Hamas and Hezbollah are not, and they want us all dead here in America, I would have to support Israel. Because while both of them are committing war crimes, at least they are pro-Western. That is kind of the way I look at that if we want to move on to that level. Is Israel doing things that look like war crimes? Yeah, sort of. But Matthew explained largely why, and that's also how I would explain it as well. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to DeMarcu11, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, DeMarcu, for that support. He said, always interesting information, and thanks.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying the interesting information. I actually saw you throw that in, I think, during one of our talks about how America kind of works. And I thank you for enjoying that because, not really something we talk about much at all, really. And we generally avoid stuff like that completely. But considering some of the stuff that happened today that was generally in the West's and Ukraine's favor, it kind of ended up becoming a point of discussion, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, I saw someone in the live chat here saying that one of their relatives was a hostage for like 264 days with one of the terrorist groups, the proxy forces. They said Israel's not committing war crimes. Now, on that thing right there, I have to say, Israel, and pretty much every country out there, honestly, commits war crimes in some capacity. Some intentionally do it, like Russia, like they go out there purposely looking to commit war crimes, and some countries do it by sort of, not really accident, more like unintentionally, like it's just a side effect of what they're doing. Israel is doing it unintentionally. They're not going out looking to cause war crimes, but by definition, they do commit war crimes. Ukraine has also done the same thing, and the United States has also committed war crimes as well. Every country has pretty much done it, but it's a matter of intent behind it. Israel does not have the intent to cause them, but countries like Russia do. So I would have to disagree with you on that. I understand why you're saying that, because you don't like the proxy forces. I can't stand the proxies either. They're evil, and they're funded by Iran, and they're terrorist groups. But at the same time, we can't deny reality just because of that fact. But that's just me. But Enforcer, would you like to weigh in?
I think you hit that pretty much dead on the nail. And so we'll move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5 and says Israel has hit a lot of VIPs from multiple Iranian proxies, and it makes me wonder if they're getting intel from a snitch somewhere high up and important.
It's a mole. It's a mole, but still, thank you so much for the support, Kachulian. That is an interesting point. I wonder if there's some kind of a mole in the Iranian government that keeps on putting out this info, because it is pretty wild how they're just smacking them around all over the place now. Really no hesitation involved. It's actually pretty interesting. So I would actually say that's probably a good point. There may be a mole in the Iranian government somewhere putting out information on everyone. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. We are on to the next one.
And this one goes to ST Fanboy, who puts in a 5. And he's a ST Fanboy. He must be a fan of I think it's the Ford Focus ST or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. He said, I wish I could give you guys more, and I love this channel, and thanks for the info, and love Ukraine.
Hey, and thank you so much for loving the channel and enjoying the info, because we try and put out as much info as we can all the time, every time. And of course, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. You make it possible for us to do this thing. And also, don't worry about supporting it more or less. We're just happy that people support it at all. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wyatt Logan, who puts in a 5. He says, trying to keep the ads away and enforcers. You give us honest analysis, good or bad. Plus, you don't do politics, unlike Chris's mom, who will do any politician. Oh my.
Chris's mom has made the rounds in Washington, by the way. They call her the Washington Nightcrawler. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you so much for support, Wyatt Logan, and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for keeping the ads away, giving us an honest analysis, good or bad, and not doing politics, because that's one thing I don't like, is doing politics. And I absolutely hate it when I hope tonight that with what we've been saying, which has been about politics, but it's not political, like supporting one side or the other. I hope that a lot of people have gotten from this that we try and be as fair and balanced with everything as possible, including that, which is usually very charged, which is how I think it should be. Because we see a lot of people out there who don't do that at all, especially a lot of people who kind of started off in the same sphere as we did, kind of covering the Ukraine war. A lot of them have gone hyper political. Like they literally try and make a foreign policy matter a domestic political matter with how much they tie it into the US election, which is really bizarre to me. I don't really think that's right. I don't like that one bit. And I would generally have to say it's horrendous looking. And not only that, it's really stupid to me. Like, I can't stand when people act like because they're celebrities or they're bigger YouTubers, they can just preach to people and their words mean something. Like, y'all are gonna vote how y'all vote. Like, I know that. And it doesn't matter what I say. Why in the world am I going to pretend like I'm some kind of a really important person who's going to change the world? Like, I actually have an impact. Y'all are going to do what y'all want to do. And I'm just a person like y'all. Why in the world am I special? Why in the world would I be special to tell y'all what y'all's opinion should be and why y'all would be right or wrong on that kind of a thing? That makes no sense to me. Democracy is supposed to be where y'all have a voice and where y'all have a say. And I know many of you are voting differently than each other in this chat. It comes out every once in a while and we see it. And I'm 100% for that. I think y'all should all have your own independent ideas and make your own independent decisions about what's best for you. And I don't think that this channel should ever get in the way of that and try and mire that and try and make it a popularity contest where if you like me, you vote a certain way. That's not how it's supposed to work. Y'all are supposed to be voting for what is best for you as an individual, whether it's good for me or not, or whether it's what I would agree with or not. And that's how democracy is supposed to work. And I hope that this channel can kind of further that opinion, at least on how that should work well. And I feel like people should generally deride folks who feel like they have a platform and a voice from trying to really polarize a certain political option. I feel like that's abusing such a platform. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Sir Thanks a Lot, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Sir Thanks a Lot, for that support. And we're thanking you a lot for that support. And no comment attached to it, but thank you very much. And we also have a 5 from Kachulian343 once again, who says, a country isn't a parent that's supposed to rule us. The country is a child, and the people call out the bad, praise the good, and vote accordingly. That's true. I agree with that, Kachulian. I think some people actually would disagree with you, though. But I agree with that. The country is there to serve the people, not the other way around. But I think some people disagree. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I agree with that completely. And I thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. That's why I will say this. I'm not generally a big fan of the government, especially the federal government. Now, I actually do make a distinction with this. I'm going to explain this really quickly. That's why I hate it when the federal government gets involved in any kind of moral decision-making processes, passing laws saying that something is good or something is bad. I don't really think that is the role of the federal government, because that's kind of assuming that the government is supposed to be taking a role where they protect your interests like you're almost a child. I don't really like that on a federal level. But on a state level, though, I get it. Because on a state level, people in Alabama could say something like, we like seatbelts because they reduce auto accident fatalities. And so the state of Alabama could pass legislation saying that any automobile in the state of Alabama must be equipped with a seatbelt. Or, anyone who purchases an automobile in the state of Alabama must equip the car with a seatbelt. But another state, like Florida, and this is actually something that's kind of true, Florida could go, we don't really care, and if people die in an auto accident, they should have just driven better, no seatbelts. Like, you don't have to have a seatbelt in the car, and you don't have to wear one. And that could be their decision. I don't really feel like that's a for example, that's something that the federal government should decide. And I know a lot of people are gonna be like, "What? You don't want to save people from dying in auto accidents?" Look, it's a free country. Like, if someone doesn't want to wear a seatbelt and they end up getting themselves killed, that's on them. Like, that really is. Like, if you're that stupid, go for it. Like, good on you, pal. You got flung out of the windshield and you got killed and you got splattered across a road. But if you're smart enough to wear one, good on you. That's your decision. But if a state wants to make a different decision than that, even if it doesn't seem like that's a good decision, then so be it. Like, that's their role. Like, the federal government should not be getting involved in moral matters. Like really, a lot of the things that kind of are like big talking points right now, I just don't think the federal government should be involved in that at all. Like, the federal government should be involved in administrative things, maintaining the interstate system, maintaining public transportation infrastructure, maintaining our national armed forces, things like that. Like, that's really what the federal government is for. The federal government should rarely be stepping in and trying to regulate moral matters. Most of that should be left to the states, because each state is different and each state has a bit of a different answer to each independent problem. And I feel like that is more representative of the people, is to cut it on down a little bit to a smaller level and let each state make up their own mind on different things, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, a lot of people, also, by the way, to explain why Florida is kind of like that, Florida doesn't have a law on the book where if you're riding a motorcycle, you have to wear a helmet. They don't have one. I don't think they still have one, because I remember growing up, that was it. Like, that was the law. If you went down to Florida and you were on a motorcycle, you did not have to wear a helmet. So if you got in a crash on a motorcycle, you were like practically dead. Like, your head was going to get crushed in if you fell off of a motorcycle at like 60 miles an hour without a helmet. But, you know,
Man, it's the total opposite in Alabama on that one. Like, you have to have the helmet, and also, I used to have a GoPro on my old, like, motorcycle helmet, and I would film stuff on it, various things. But I would go and film stuff with it, and I realized one day it's actually illegal to have the GoPro mounted on the helmet like that. And you can actually get a very hefty ticket for doing that. And it's not because it's unsafe for other people. It's because it's like one of those nanny laws. Like, for example, if you were to scrape the ground with the GoPro on and the mount, it could snag like maybe like an indent in the pavement or something like that, and it could twist your neck and kill you. And it's not a law that's designed to protect the society or the public. It's designed to protect the individual, kind of like the seatbelt law, which was really stupid because I almost got in trouble for that by a cop for having a GoPro mounted on my helmet, which was really stupid. Luckily, I didn't get a ticket for it, but you almost got in trouble. And it's those type of things I don't like.
Yeah, but still, if that was a state law, it's like, you know, I guess that is what it is. Some goofy legislators came up with that idea. But I don't like the federal government, you know, being like, let's pass a law that makes it illegal to wear GoPros on helmets nationwide. It's like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Also, someone said, what about slavery? That's like one of the few things that the government should come in and just be like, no, because that isn't really like a moral issue. That's more of a rights issue. Like, how in the world can a citizen not be a citizen, you know, and have almost no rights? That's more along that route. Moral, in a sense, one of the few times I would say that the government should step forward and say something like, that's wrong. But on most things, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why the federal government would even care about that at all. You know, if like states have different deals about that, that is what it is. Like, that's literally for everything. Like, Alabama could say machine guns are legal. If you want to buy a machine gun, you can buy one. And then California could say every single gun is illegal, but a 6-shooter revolver or a single-shot rolling block rifle. And that's what they want. I mean, if that's what the state of California wants, that's what they get. You know, like, that's just how it works. If it ends up backfiring on them, that's their problem. That's not my problem. I don't live in California. That's for the people of California to fix. If they want to, they can vote for legislators that will reverse that. And in Alabama, you could just keep voting for legislators until you're able to own tanks. Like, if you want to, you could just do that. Like, that's largely what I think it should work as. Federal government should be making almost no decisions on moral topics. That should almost be regulated entirely to the states, and then the federal government focuses entirely on administrative matters, making sure that public necessities are upkept and there's an armed force that is standing and representing the entire nation abroad. And also the federal government does other things like international trade, stuff like that, but that's more in their wheelhouse. Everything else is for the states. The 10th Amendment lays that out quite clearly, and for some reason, people don't think like that anymore. I like to think that I do, though, but that's my personal opinion. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Also, I see someone say, that violates the Second Amendment. does it though? I mean, like, like, does it really? Because like the state of, like, the Constitution says you have a right to bear arms, but it doesn't really say.
Oh, you're getting political.
Well, listen. I think everyone knows. Like, I own a decent amount of guns. I own some with 30-round mags. I own some with bigger mags than that. I think I have a 100-round mag in here somewhere. But beyond that, it doesn't really clarify. Like just in my opinion, it doesn't really clarify. It's kind of a little bit of an open thing. It says shall not be infringed, but then there's kind of an argument on, well, where does that, like what is, a lot of people have an argument about what does that mean. I think it's somewhat clear to me. Like, to be quite honest, I would think it should be perfectly fine to own a machine gun without a tax stamp. Like, that would be my honest opinion. But the state of California and the people living there may have a completely different answer. They could say that firearm ownership should only extend to limited capacity guns. They kind of already say that right now. And while I don't really think that's a good idea, and I think that kind of is not really in the spirit of the Second Amendment, that's kind of their decision to make. And so if the state of California wants to have statutes on the book that make that the case, they can. But, considering I'm from Alabama, I largely like it the way it is right now, and I'm pretty happy with it. But that's just kind of how I look at it. I don't really consider it that big of a deal. It's like, like, I have my things. The state has certain kind of laws and statutes that allow that. I'm happy with that. I'm going to vote for people who support that. And if California doesn't like that, they vote that way. It's a completely different state. It's not my people. If folks don't like that, they can move out of California and elsewhere to another state that will have laws that are conducive to the kind of life they want to live. Or they can vote for people inside of the state of California that would support the kind of life that they would want to live, and those kinds of statutes and laws. That's just kind of how I look at it.
If I was in California, I would have to consider moving out just over the soggy straws because they get paper and they get wet and then they get soggy. I'm just joking, of course, but the soggy straw thing is a bit of a doozy. They were using those paper straws out there though when we went, but I think they had shirred them up or something like that, or like sprayed probably some nice juicy deadly chemicals on them to make them waterproof because they didn't get soggy with us when we got some stuff out there. But I think they used to get soggy back in the day.
Yeah, they used to get soggy. I think they fixed that though. I think they like cover them in like a wax or something now. But yeah, that's largely how I think about it though. Just to answer that, because I feel like that's one I can talk about, because it's not like I'm one of those people who will say something like, oh, I think guns should be, like be regulated or not. Like I own a lot of guns. Like, that's like one of the things we wanted to do on this channel, and that's why we have a lot of them, is because we were wanting to review guns, and then YouTube pulled the rug from under us by pretty much demonetizing any gun content. So we can't do that now. But I will say, like, as far as that goes, it's kind of a state to state thing. Like, I largely believe that the federal government should not really be getting involved too much on setting standards across the board, because doesn't that remove like the flavor of each state? Like let me get into that for a second. Like, states do have different cultures. Like Alabama is like Alabamians are completely different than Californians. Just to give an example here, they're entirely different people with entirely different things that matter to them, and different accents, different things that they do, different things that they like, different things they dislike. They're entirely different places. Why in the world should the federal government be coming down and making a blanket statement saying that regardless of cultural differences in this country, California and Alabama are going to do the same thing whether one likes it or the other doesn't? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like, like for example, with some of the things I do think have to kind of be laid out, like unreasonable searches and seizures. That kind of is an across the board thing, and the Supreme Court lays that out. But you have to respect the different flavors of Americans there are. I mean, all Americans are not the same across the board. There are very big differences from different regions in America, and I feel like the laws of these states should largely be representing the different flavors and varieties of Americans that we have in this country, and the best way to do that is through the state legislators. And if people don't like it, they can change it in their state legislators, but if there's not enough people that dislike it, those laws stay on the books, and that is what it is. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ed, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Ed, for that support as well. He said, Irish Ed here. He said Churchill had a heart attack in 1941 at the White House. He had a doctor covered up as he was addressing Canadian Parliament very soon.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that one, Irish Ed. And that's very interesting here. Churchill actually had a decent amount of heart attacks though through his life, but I didn't know about that one in particular. That's actually pretty interesting. And so with that, I got to thank you so much for the support and sharing an interesting historical tidbit there, Irish Ed. And thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping this thing to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And I thank you so much once again.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment yet again, who puts in a 2. He says, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and I thank you so much once again for support, LSA Sergeant Figment, and hit that like button, folks. That is an order. We've gotten up to almost 3,000 likes tonight, and I think we can get up a little bit higher than that. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Elka Sir, who puts in a 2 and says, today's forecast is getting hot. 6.5 on the Bliat scale.
Hey, and I thank you so much once again for support, Elka Sir, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, today's forecast is getting hot, and it is a 6.5 on the Bliat scale, Bliat. And I gotta thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And with that, we are on to the live chats. But before we get on to them, though, Mandy, I saw one interesting thing, and I want to bring this up because it's actually a very interesting point. And Mace is a old guard, and I got to say something here that historically it actually is a little bit more murky than one would think. Mace said there's nothing political about the Second Amendment. I would actually argue historically there is. Like like the Second Amendment and how it's been interpreted has actually been debate really throughout the entirety of American history. People have been trying to either limit what the Second Amendment has meant or really expand it to include a lot more than what people were thinking at the time. To bring up an example of this, out in the Wild West, a very famous city that a lot of people will know of is Dodge City. Dodge City and many other cities in the Wild West, to try and deal with crime, actually had laws that banned the possession of firearms within city limits. And those were enforced by local law enforcement. So if you came into town, you had to turn in your firearms to local law enforcement. And if you lived within the town, you could not privately own and possess a firearm. Like, you could own one, but you would have to turn it into the local police and then go retrieve it from them whenever you would want to use it. That is a time where you could say that firearms ownership was restricted. Whether that's something that you agree with or disagree with, that's a matter of personal opinion. I personally don't really agree with that, but still beyond that, however, it is something that the local town decided was something they wanted to do to try and deal with crime. And whether we agree with that or not, if the majority rule is that they want something like that, even if it's considered by some an infringement, the will of the people is generally followed, at least on the local level. Also, that was used as a tool of political repression back in the day for the large part, because they would kind of like enforce that on some and not on others. Like, people who were in a certain political party, they wouldn't really enforce it on, but the other people they would. At other times in history, there's also been other limitations. Like, for example, when McKinley was shot, there was actually a massive push at the time to ban the possession of small pocket revolvers nationwide, because McKinley was shot and killed by a small pocket revolver, and so a lot of people said that concealing those and keeping those on one's person was very dangerous, and it could endanger the public, because anyone could carry these things anywhere and just blast someone, and that's a big issue. Hell, even the state of New York, this is very interesting. Even back in the very early 1900s, I'm talking about in the 1910s, you actually had to go to the police commissioner of the state of New York at the state level and get a writ to, well, a writ, but it was more so like a license or a permission to be able to buy a gun. You had to say what gun it was, what serial number it was, what you intended on using that gun for, and then the guy who would review this could approve or disapprove of that request. Which some people
kind of still like that, actually.
Yeah, it kind of is still like that, and that could be considered a very big infringement. But that has largely been on the books in the state of New York for about a century at this point. It's a tradition up there now that that's the case, and so it kind of is historically, at least by a few small examples, and there's a load of others I could give, but these are just a few of them. It is a bit of a debate. And and you could fall on either side of that camp. We're not here to talk about which one's right or not. But it actually has been something that has been subject to a bit of debate, and also what a well-regulated militia is. Like, it largely has been determined now by law that militias made outside of the state government are unlawful. Like, like any kind of pop-up militia. Like, those are generally unlawful and usually will get you put on a watch list, because the well-regulated militia side of things, at least in how it's turned into, and this isn't even really an existing thing in the modern day, but back in the day, a state government could raise a militia. And you saw this a lot in the U.S. Civil War, especially in the Confederacy, is that the state of Alabama would raise entire divisions out of the state. So we would have like the 6th Alabama, the 5th Alabama, and all of these guys were bringing weapons they owned from home. And so they were buying the weapons privately, but they were buying the weapons to be a part of a well-regulated militia raised by the state, instead of by a private individual just out there in the woods, kind of like how a lot of people try to do it nowadays. And so that's kind of
I personally interpreted that to mean like, you could raise a militia if you chose, but I guess it was interpreted a different way. But
No.
that's the thing about the Constitution and stuff like that. Depending on what judge is looking at it and stuff like that is making the ruling, it can vary, like depending on who's looking at it. Basically, and it's like also people claim judges aren't political, but they really are. It's like, if we're being honest here, all judges have political leanings. They're people, so they'll look at it a certain way depending on what side they're from, and it just like it varies depending on who's looking at it.
Also, someone said the Constitution doesn't ban unregulated militias. I believe most state laws or some federal law, some federal statute actually does. Like, you can't just be like, I'm Billy Bob and I'm creating the militia kick-ass, because that will end up getting you put on a watch list. And if you end up doing something a little bit too crazy, because generally that law is enforced with a bit of benevolence. Like, if you don't really do anything stupid, no one's really going to come after you, but they will observe you. But if you do something stupid like, hey, I'm going to use my militia to overthrow the governor, like, they are going to come down and get you, because it's an unlawful militia. It wasn't raised by the state government, and that is generally against most state laws, or at least federal statute. Let me make sure that is correct. Can you raise a militia? This is going to get me put on a watch list, but we got to get the answer to this. Let's see. So here we go. Let me see if I can actually go find the statute for this specifically, because it does say it is unlawful, but let me find the specific statute. Let's see. Let's see here. During which open, let's see here. Can we find the actual statute? Matthew, can you search around for this as well? Because it looks as though the answer is no. Let's see here. Can you have a private militia? All 50 states. This seems to be the answer across the board, but I can't find the specific statutes to back this up. But all 50 states prohibit private, unauthorized militias and military units from engaging in activities reserved for the state militia, including law enforcement activities. So it seems as though, from what I can tell, that is the case. So if you wanted to interpret the Second Amendment that way, well-regulated militia actually has to be within the confines of the state government. But then again, that's still open to debate, because while the amendment sounds so straightforward, and I'd largely have to agree it sounds straightforward, when you look at it though and you try and come up with multiple different arguments, it's very easy to make a slew of different arguments in support and against support of either expanding or contracting gun ownership. It's a very interesting thing. Also, Mace, a lot of people always say the Declaration of Independence says this and that. The Declaration of Independence is not binding law in this country. The Declaration of Independence is not even really a document in question, because like they can say life, property, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, or the pursuit of happiness, as the altered version says, but that has no binding. The binding articles of this nation is the United States Constitution, and then the constitutions of the state governments. The Articles of Association and also the Declaration of Independence have like no binding whatsoever on anything in the United States. They're really just kind of cool articles to read. But anyways,
also, if you want to create an unorganized militia, how you do it without like causing any issues? Do you know the answer? There is actually a loophole around it.
I do not.
You just call it a gun club, and that's totally legal. Like, you just create a gun club, and that's your unorganized militia.
I suppose, but I bet you if you started to act in a more in a more kind of a militia-like manner, I'm sure that someone would get put on the watch list somewhere out there. Because
Oh, well, unless you're like going online and being like, oh, we have this militia out here that we're calling a gun club or something like that. Nobody's gonna know. They're just gonna be like, oh, it's just a gun club. They go out to the range, they practice and stuff like that, and that's just what they do. But you know, in reality, honestly though, like when people think of militia, they think about somebody uprising against the government. That's what people think about when they hear a militia. It could just be a group of people that like want to be like preppers or something like that. That want to like become marksmen, know how to shoot guns, know how to survive, and things like that. And that's like harmless, that is. But people think about militias like, oh, that's like a group that hates the government and wants to like get powerful to then like overthrow it or something, which that is sometimes the case, but you know, not all of them are like that.
To me, in my mind, militias are always created from the state because there wasn't really any militias that existed outside of any kind of like an organized structure. Like even the militias at the beginning of America's history, like they weren't raised by John Smitty and the gang, you know, like from like Smithersville or whatever. You know, it was like the Continental Congress was like, we're going to start raising irregular militias throughout the colonies, and then they started going around and organizing militias, but it was through some sort of like a official government apparatus. Like the United States didn't exist at the time, but I hope people still get what I'm saying here. They were largely being created by an official organization of a sort. It had a purpose for doing it. And I haven't really seen a lot of examples through American history where militias were just raised out of the blue for nothing. These militias are a thing of war. Like that's what they generally are. They're raised in times of emergencies when you just need a load of manpower and regulars do the job. And so, you know, you get a bunch of armed citizenry, you put them together, they turn into a militia, and that's why they own guns, is because it's largely on the citizenry to equip and provide themselves with the arms necessary to create a militia. So that way, when the state calls upon the citizens to serve as pretty much irregular soldiers or, you know, armed citizenry, they can step forward with their own equipment and serve in that state militia. That's kind of what I've always kind of understood it to be. But Matthew is correct. We are running out of time. But it's been a very fun conversation, though. But with that, we are on to the next one. But I hope that kind of talks about that. Well, you know, not to get into like what it actually is or what it isn't, but still it's an interesting conversation to have from time to time. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat. This one goes to Sandra, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, Sandra, for that support. It said, good morning, LSA from the UK, and please take one from the chat in LSA.
Hey, and we will make sure to take one from the chat. And good morning to the UK. I hope you've been having a fun time over there this morning. It's a beautiful place over there. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Judy in the live chat, who says, if Israel does take Lebanon, then do you think that will push Iran to attack Israel?
I don't know. It's a good question. It's kind of half and half. We actually talked about this a little bit earlier. I think it really depends on if the United States backs Israel. If we do, and we do that with actual physical support, the Iranians will probably back off. If we don't, they probably will attack Israel. So for me, it kind of depends on what America is going to be doing here in the future. And so I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And holy moly, it's the return of Walter A. Lakota.
Damn, and Walter A. Lakota Jr. has put in a massive, the largest super chat of the night, a $200 donation, and huge shout out to Walter for that massive support. And also it's good to see you once again, excuse me. He said, Aloha, the Enforcer Matt and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. It seems that things are getting hotter this time of year. And nautical fact, Nantucket sleigh ride is after harpooning a whale, and it runs. Hawaii fact, Pali Lookout on Oahu is where Kamahama one fought and pushed the warriors off.
Interesting. I actually didn't know what a Nantucket sleigh ride is, but that's actually pretty cool to know. It apparently had to deal with the whale. And I gotta say, thank you for sharing that. That's actually a really cool little nautical slang term right there. And also, hello to you. And things are still getting hotter even at this point in the year, Walter A. Lakota. That is correct. But it's great to hear from the OG Ellison Bosun. And also, let's go to Hawaii and look at Pali Lookout. So I'll just type that in really quickly so we can find that really fast, because I don't really know a lot about the geography of this area. So here we are. Here it is. And where is this? This is on Oahu. But beyond that, it's in Oahu. And so we need to go up here. So maybe here? Yeah, right here. Oh, that's pretty cool, actually. This is a really neat looking place. And this is apparently where they united the islands by shoving people off a cliff. But beyond that, pretty cool to see. Beautiful, by the way, out here. It's really nice. Maybe one day we ought to go to Hawaii and take a look at it, because that would be pretty cool to see. But thank you so much.
Hawaii, Hawaii, ha.
Hawaii, hee, Hawaii, ha, Hawaii, hoo, hoo. But anyways, moving on from that, I still thank you so much for that incredible support, Walter A. Lakota, in throwing in such interesting historic facts about the interesting state of Hawaii, and not only that, an interesting nautical or maritime term as well. And thank you once again for the massive support, Walter A. Lakota. A unexpected surprise, to be sure, but a very welcome one. And I got to thank you for massively supporting the channel tonight and helping it to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a $5 donation and says, if you took... whoa, Jack. I don't know about this one. It seems a little political. Kachulian. Sadly, I think we'll have to skip this one unless the enforcer approves it. So let the enforcer take a look. He's the arbiter of the truth on this super chat.
I mean, it's kind of true. I mean, I'm kind of debating whether it's political or not. I mean, it's honestly kind of true, though. Like, what do you think, Matthew?
I mean, personally, it sounds political to me, because typically that issue right there leans one side pretty hard. So I don't know. It sounds political.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to attack Kachulian's super chat, by the way. Like, you actually do have a point, but if we read it off, it could start a political firestorm.
Yeah, because I actually think it's kind of funny to say that. It's true, and it's not like in a bad way, like trying to like really jab them or something. I just think it's kind of funny to think about that, because it's kind of like that with other states and other specific things, like Colorado. Like, I can't even get into that, because we can't talk about Texas. But still, I thank you so much for the support, Coachillian, and help with the channel keep on running. I would read it. I don't know how some people are going to react to that, though, sadly, but I actually do think it's funny. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. I sadly wasn't able to address that one well, but I still thank you for the support nonetheless. And with that, we are now moving on into the live chats. We're going to be answering the Morse code decoders, 3 live chats, and then rounding out tonight's stream. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And tonight we had the entire Morse code roster. Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Brenew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsap, Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said LSA Morse code decipher says most of the world is at war, and the West seems to be winning almost all of it in LLT, LSA.
And there's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all massively for making sure to throw in a nice little Morse code deciphering and get it dead on the nail again, because y'all just keep doing that day in and day out. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Bullseye Bob, who says, did the Russian Federation fill the recent vacancy from the gang member that killed the officer?
They have not. That guy died so recently. It was just today. I don't think they have filled in that vacancy just yet, or really gotten them well seated in position. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Altherin, who says, how many other major proxy groups like Hezbollah are out there? And at some point, Iran has to do more.
There are only 2 other ones out there beyond Hezbollah that are supported by the Iranians. There's Hamas, which has largely been destroyed at this point, and then there's the Yemeni Houthis in western Yemen, which are also supported by Iran. So there isn't really many of them, but they do cause a lot of havoc within the Middle East specifically. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and this one right here is going to go to Bill Duff, who says, have you seen any credible sources reporting that the son of Osama bin Laden will take the place of Nasrallah?
I have not heard about that. Mandy, have you heard anything about that?
No, I have not. I do know that bin Laden had a lot of sons, though, and they're still some of them are still roaming around the Middle East. But I did not hear that they were like going to take over the Hezbollah group. That would be kind of interesting, because typically they're associated with a different group. So I don't know. That could be true.
It could be, possibly so, maybe. But with that, I hope that kind of addresses that well. I'd largely have to declare ignorance on that. And lo and behold, I said that was the final question of the night, but we actually have 2 more super chats that have come in, crazily enough. But I will have to say this, these will have to be the last 2 of the night because we are starting to run quite significantly overtime. So, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so jumping into our second to last super chat of the night, we have the first ever super chat from Jero B, who puts in a 20-pound donation. And thank you very much, Jero, for that first-time support. He said, Russian munition depots on fire again, massive explosions in Jesk. And also General Vornikov died there at the airport, and Kingal rockets destroyed.
And that's pretty interesting to hear. In Yesk, of all places, getting blown up there. I will have to look into that because I think that may be happening while we're live on air, so we may not have any info on it at the moment. But I do thank you for sharing that, and I thank you for throwing in your first super chat ever, Jero B, or Yarrow B. I'm not really sure which way that's supposed to be pronounced. But nevertheless, I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make it possible. And thank you for throwing in your first super chat ever. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Quantum Fighter, who puts in a 20 as well. Thank you very much, Quantum Fighter, for that support. He said, take my money. He said, do you know any USMC history and their efforts in the Boxer Rebellion or during the Banana Wars in Haiti? Daniel Daly, The Small Wars Manual. Really interesting. Thanks for the beautiful singing, Andrew, and LSA forever.
Yeah, you're lying to yourself, Quantum Fire, to say it's beautiful singing. But still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And yes, I do know a little bit of U.S. Marine Corps history. The Marine Corps was actually founded by a guy, I forgot his name, but it was in a tavern here in the United States. And his idea was like, hey, what if we just gathered up some folks, sailed down to the Bahamas, and just rained hell on the British? How about that? And they went, yeah, that's pretty cool. So they all gathered up. They all sailed down on like a cutter, pretty much. Well, not really a cutter. It was smaller than that. It was like a sloop, I think. But they sailed down to the Bahamas, caused hell, and then they sailed back. It was like the first thing the Marine Corps in the United States ever did. And everyone was like, wow, that's actually cool. We should make them like a real deal. So their first real taste of action as a armed force of the United States, or as I kind of call it, the Republic, because I like the sound of that. I think the Republic just sounds really like it goes hard, I guess is the best way to say it, so I like saying it. But anyways, their first real taste of action under the banner of this glorious republic of ours was during the Barbary Wars, which was a series of wars that we fought as the United States against the Berber pirates of northern Africa, because they were actually capturing and imprisoning the U.S. Sailors off of merchant ships and forcing them into a life of slavery. A lot of people don't know that, actually. That's kind of an interesting thing. But anyways, the Marines sailed into Tripoli, like the port of Tripoli down here, in the middle of the night on the USS Constitution, ended up setting fire to a massive amount of the port, ended up causing a massive amount of damage, ended up killing a good amount of people, and then they hopped right back on the USS Constitution and sailed right out of Tripoli. So whenever y'all hear about from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, this is the Tripoli that they're talking about right there. Like, that's it. Like, many people don't know that, but that's where that's from. But anyways, moving on from that, another interesting thing is that the Marine Corps hymn has actually gone through a massive change. Like in lyrics, like it's completely different than what it really was, because the original lyrics was something like from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles on the land and on the sea. And some of y'all will know that's even different right there, because it's on the land, air, and sea now. But it used to be on the land and on the sea because there was no air yet. You know, the Marine Corps didn't have an air wing yet. But sadly, Matthew is right. He's over here. He's like, man, I'm going to have to hop off in a minute. And so we are starting to run a little bit short on time. But I wish I could tell you more about the history of the Marines, because the Marines are a wildly interesting branch with a very rich history. But sadly, we are starting to run really low on time. But I do thank you so much once again for the amazing support, Quantum Fighter, and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, long live the LSA, and thank you for enjoying my singing. And so with that, we are on to the last super chat, and then we're going to be rounding this thing out. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and also real quick, shout out to Andrew Jr. for putting in a $5 donation as well, and thank you very much, Andrew, for that support, and we appreciate it. And also, the final one of the night that came in before the cutoff goes to Max TNT. He said, at least German and Romanian people are so desensitized to a nuclear war and are so manipulated by the media that they don't even care about such a war crimes, I think they meant to say.
if such a war comes. I guess a nuclear war or something like that. I mean, perhaps so, maybe so. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but only time will tell. But still, huge thanks to you once again, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. Interestingly enough, not on a final live chat, but a final super chat, because we got through all of our final live chats, and then we got more super chats. But still, I thank you all so much once again for enjoying this channel tonight. 67,000 people have watched this before it ended, and at the peak tonight, there was only 8.6 thousand people here. That actually is a load of people, but compared to the norm, that's actually a little bit lower than most days, but still, it doesn't matter to me. We're happy to have every single one of y'all here, and I got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. If y'all have enjoyed it, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you all tomorrow for the Sunday night fundraiser. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for another fantastic stream, of course, and we'll see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern, and also maybe midday as well for a short war video. But with that, thank you all once again. Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
The Lee Spring Army